Morning, everybody. I will just ask Deputy Chair Cromwell to open our meeting with a Mihi Whakatau.
Ko tēnei tururu, te koukou mai nei ki hai mā, hititi ki hai mā, raka tūpoka nui o tururu, te reko. Hepo, he iau, ka watia te heiwa, mauri ora. Ki te rukarawa, nōna te timataka, nōna te whakamutunga. Kaori inoi ani hoki, nāna katoa, he tiaki manaki ka wā katoa. Ka huri ai kia rātou, ko hea ki te pō, tēnei wiki, tēnei marama, tēnei tau. Boi mai, oki mai, tiraha. Whakatā, rātou kia rātou, tātou kia tātou, no reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou. Mihi tēnei, ki te whānau Davies I tēnei wā, I whānau mai te Pepe Elijah, mihi atu kia jau rawa ko Adelina, I tēnei wā, nei te mihi mai te kauni e taiao, kia koe te rakatira, e te pāpā, tēnā koe, tēnā kōrua, tēnā koutou, kia koe, Pira, I tai mai I tēnei rā, ki te kōrero kia mātou, I te kauni hera nei, no reira tēnā koe, koutou katoa, hara mai, huri noa te whare nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā tata katoa, kia koe e te he mana, Dion.
Kia ora, thank you for that, Deputy Chair Cromwell, and to Councillor Davies online, congratulations. First, I just want to welcome us to the 611th Council meeting. I have been informed that we have a quorum present, and I'm pleased to declare this meeting open. First off, I just want to make an acknowledgement to former chairperson Jenny Huey for her award of Officer of New Zealand Order of Merit in the recent King's Birthday honours for services to community law and governance. And I'll just read out a few words. Courtesy thank you of the Waimakariri district where seems Jenny now resides. She supported community law around New Zealand in several governance leadership roles since 2006, serving as the co-chair of Community Law Centres Aotearoa from 2018 to 2026, and having been on the national board since 2011, and a whole lot of other amazing community initiatives around law, and also was the Canterbury Regional Council chairperson from 2019 to 2022. So just want to make that acknowledgement to Jenny Huey and passing on our congratulations for her King's Birthday honours. I will now, as Councillor Scott, have you got something?
I just want to endorse what you've said about Jenny. Her passion was the area that she worked in terms of the justice side of things, and get caught in a conversation with her and run out of things to say, she'd give you a dissertation on where she was with that. So she really was a hard worker on that, and so well done, Jenny.
And acknowledge that, Councillor Scott, you were the Deputy Chair while Jenny was the Chairperson as well, so worked closely with her. I think I understand Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to take this opportunity to offer our congratulations to Brigadier Retired Neville Riley, otherwise known as Neville, who was our Regional Civil Defence Controller from 2011 through until 2021. Just of recent times, Neville was awarded the Order of Timor-Leste on the 24th anniversary of the restoration of independence in Timor-Leste, along with a number of other people. On that day when the vote was counted and independence was had, Timor-Leste erupted into militant violence right across the islands. It was a dangerous place. Folk that were in there with the United Nations mission, the peacekeeping, and others needed to get out, needed protection. Neville was in charge of the United Nations mission at that time. He went out into the districts on multiple occasions, unarmed in a vehicle, searching for people who were trapped by the militia. And in one particular instance, a member of the civilian force was trapped in a house with the military outside shooting the windows out. Neville drove out unarmed, rescued the chap, took him back in, and for that in the year 2000, he was awarded the New Zealand Gallantry Star, which is one step below the Victoria Cross, lost for words for a second, shows, I guess, the bravery involved in that situation. So I think, we should note and send a note to Neville congratulating him on the Order of Timor-Leste, a recognition of what he did 25 years ago as that country regained its independence and the challenges of those quite tumultuous times. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for that, and we will make sure that we have something that we can send out to him. I was actually part of an operation that was in part of that myself when I was in the military back those days, so I know a little bit about the bravery that went on in those places. I'll move on. If there's nobody else that wants to say anything, I'll move on to apologies. I have had no apologies received for this meeting. However, I just want to note that Councillor Davies is online, and Councillors Moody and Robinson will also be online at some point. I note Councillor Moody isn't online at this point in time. Are there any other departures for early departure? I note that I will possibly be an early departure, and in that case, Councillor or Deputy Chair Cramwell will take the chair at that time. That'll be later this afternoon. Okay. Conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest on today's agenda? I just want to say a few words on this. I remind councillors to consider whether they have any actual, potential or perceived conflicts of interest, be they financial or non-financial, in relation to any items on the agenda, but particularly in relation to item 8.3, proposed plan change to the regional plans. I note that for transparency, Councillor Mackenzie, Sunkel and Faulkner have been granted an exemption from the Office of the Auditor-General to participate in decision-making on proposed regional plan changes. A copy of that exemption letter is available on the Regional Council's public-facing website. And with that in mind, are there any additional interests or conflicts to be declared in relation to item 8.3 or any other items on the agenda?
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Robinson.
It's not a conflict. Thank you. Just for transparency, I want to acknowledge my past involvement with Aotearoa Water Action, a freshwater community group, but I've not had involvement in that group since before being elected in 2022. Today, I've had legal advice, and I will listen to staff reporting and commentary and to the discussion of today with an open mind, and therefore I will not be recusing myself from today's proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you for noting that. Councillor Megan Mackay.
Okay, well, I want to talk on item 9.3, the Te Ara Parahi Bay Reclamation Project. And it's just to record an interest, but I do not consider that it's a conflict of interest. So Te Taumitu Rāpaki and Ngāi Tohu Diri Runanga are connected to DP World in relation to the wider port context. And I'm a whakapapa member of both Taumitu and Ngāi Tohu Diri, and more actively involved at Taumitu. I have no personal or financial or contractual or decision-making interest in DP World. I've just recently found out about it. And for that reason, I consider that I can participate with an open mind, and also noting that it's an item for information and assurance only.
Thank you, Councillor Megan Mackay. Councillor Claire Mackay.
Just want to note for visibility with respect to 8.3, that's Plan Change 8, that I do hold a small water permit in a groundwater allocation zone that is not affected by Plan Change 8, as it's not fully or over allocated, and I could actually apply for consent under our current rules.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Councillor Ward.
I note that up till a month ago that I was the chairman and director of a proposed irrigation scheme, on which I now no longer am the chairman, and I have no longer or didn't have any financial interest in this proposed scheme. So I just want that noted as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Excuse me. Okay, with that, thank you very much, councillors, for declaring those transparently and making those notes. and those will be recorded in the minutes. We have one deputation today. That is from Dr. Peter Trolove, who is representing the New Zealand Federation of Freshwater Anglers. He is here to talk to us on matters relating to the proposed plan changes, which is included in agenda item 8.3. Dr. Trolove, you can come to the table, but I just want to remind you and councillors that detailed arguments or evidence on the merits of proposed regional plan change should be reserved for the formal submissions and hearing processes, and that I just want to make note that I will intervene if comments risk prejudicing councillors for the later decision making that they need to do. But welcome to the table, and thank you very much for taking the time to come and speak to us. You'll have 10 minutes. I'll do a ding at 9 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. No flash overheads or things. I'm just going to read this quickly. A lot to get through. So we'll kick on. Chair, councillors and staff, thank you for the opportunity to speak at the start of today's meeting. My name is Dr. Peter Trolove and I'm supported by Mr. Paul Hodgson. I'm concerned that the freshwater planning pathway for Plan 8 could be devastating for the public and fish health. Plan Change 8 is a rollback of much of ECAN's existing protections regarding the take and use of fresh water. It is basically the face of deregulation. My deputation is made on behalf of all Canterbury anglers who have witnessed their sport degraded by intensive farming over the past 3 decades. Degraded to the point of extinction in the case of Canterbury's lowland rivers and streams. For the Karakia River, my river, intensification and irrigation has resulted in the imminent extinction of the keystone species of native fish, stockel smelt. I also speak for the residents of Canterbury whose private and even some community drinking water has become so polluted that ECAN has declared a nitrate emergency. This reflects a failure of the Canterbury Regional Council to be effective in the performance of its functions under Section 30 of the RMA. I'm a retired vet of 50 years and I've had a lot of experience in various fields. My master's degree in aquatic veterinary studies was earned at the Institute of Aquaculture at Stirling University. This institute is ranked #1 of its kind in Britain. I was trained in aquatic veterinary studies to be able to support multi-million-pound fish farms where maintaining water quality and quantity is obligatory. At the Institute, water quality was non-negotiable. It was too fundamental to be the subject of opinion or hearsay. And I believe, while the outcome's less acute, the same applies to humans and the environment we live in. I'm going to get on nitrate testing. So my nitrate sensor and my ability to use it to the level of a commercial laboratory was verified by Dr. Corrine Rogers of GNS Science. In fact, she even kindly included my name as a co-author of a related peer-reviewed published paper. I have accumulated 6 years of nitrate data in the Selwyn district, and in most water bodies, the results are dire. Among ECAN's duties, which are prescribed in Section 30, is the requirement to maintain and enhance the quality and quantity of water bodies and coastal water, to maintain and enhance ecosystems in water bodies and coastal water. ECAN has declared a nitrate emergency. Surely this is a call to action to mitigate an immediate threat to public health. Nitrate levels are still trending up in 62% of monitored wells. The number of private wells exceeding the maximum allowable value for drinking water is greater than 12%. A February 24 report commissioned by ECAN, chaired by Councillor Sunkel, found ECAN's nitrate monitoring to be inadequate, both in the number of sites tested and for failing to account for the movement of water and soils. This report concluded that in its present form, ECAN's monitoring would be unable to show any trends in under 30 years. Dr. Tim Chambers, in conjunction with the Otago Medical School, is leading a study into nitrate levels after initial research revealed a repeated number of publications found increased premature births and shortened gestation times in women from drinking water at half the maximum allowable value. My fish texts contain tables on water quality parameters suitable for trout hatcheries. The recommendation is that nitrate levels should not be greater than 1 milligram per litre nitrate N. The 2.4 milligram bottom line for nitrate in Appendix 2A attributes requiring limits on resource use contained in the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management would result in observable, if not lethal, effects on trout eggs and fry. In Canterbury, trout spawn from May to August, and that's the reason why we close the fishing season. From May to October, the most susceptible life stages of trout are exposed at a time when nitrate levels in the rivers and streams are at their highest. That is why Silver Stream, Harts Creek, the Selwyn and Hines rivers are no longer prolific trout fisheries. For Canterbury anglers, the nitrate emergency is real and it is devastating. Will it take legal action from a cancer victim or the parents of a lost baby to make ECAN and water polluters take note? Plan Change 8 has been misrepresented to Council as a minor tweak to fast-track the consenting of wetlands and delayed infrastructure projects that transect groundwater. Part B of Plan Change 8 is not challenged by anglers. What has not been exposed to sufficient scrutiny is Part A, the change of use by existing consent holders, particularly in restricted water allocation zones. It disturbs me that staff are leading the Council on a pathway to Freshwater Commissioner for the sake of costs, when this is a plan change of major significance that deserves full public scrutiny in the light of day. I already find the existing like-for-like change of use dodgy when lowland consents have been obtained for use in the high country. What will happen when change of use is allowed globally in the regional plan? ECAN must not allow further growth in the form of increased irrigation and more dairy cows when it cannot manage the over-allocation and pollution of fresh water that already exists in the region. The only tools ECAN has to perform its functions are farm environment plans and the regional plan. Presently overwhelmed compliance staff resort to a high-level desktop compliance. A free-for-all consent holders changing use and or trading consents will create the need to massively increase compliance staff to trace and monitor the changed and traded consents effectively. Given that consent conditions are tailored to a specific property to mitigate the potential harm effects of a water use or take at that property, it would be reckless and irresponsible, nay negligent, if ECAN allowed permission for the take and use to be transferred to a property at a remote site where the necessary mitigation needs may be quite different. This is like taking the bridle off the horse in the ideological interests of growth, and that is why Chris Bishop's hand is so evident behind the scenes. Both the RMA and the vision and principles of the Canterbury Waterman strategy give first priority to the environment and second priority to irrigation, and they both include a precautionary principle. The RMA is the act that dictates planning at water take and use. And in that context, it seems timely to remind councillors that a National Water Conservation Order has legal primacy over a regional plan or a consent. We went to the Environment Court to learn water conservation orders are managed through councils through having obligatory regard to National Water Conservation Orders. The Minister for RMA Reform has been very active creating new legislation and amending established law to pave the way for changes such as Plan Change 8, instruments targeting resource use for economic growth at the expense of the environment. This is evident by the Minister for RMA Reform promiscuously passing laws that until recently were the prerogative of the Minister for the Environment. You've covered the conflict of interest, so I'll leave that as written and move on. But basically, to wind up, this deputation asks that councillors think hard before proceeding with Plan Change, with Plan Change 8. Part A, the part that seems to be sort of glossed over, must be removed in the best interests of the majority of ratepayers and the environment. Part A compromises ECAN's ability to perform accountabilities it is already struggling to deliver. For a decision of this magnitude, Public Excluded and the Freshwater Commissioner are the wrong path. Plan Change 8, as currently drafted, will be harmful to Cantabrians' health and well-being. Its consequences will be unsustainable and risks pushing Canterbury's freshwater environment beyond the point of recovery if it is not already there. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Trolove, and I apologise. I missaid it before, and somebody told me about saying it properly before, and I was like, and I even got it wrong. So my apologies again.
Not a problem. If you can spell it right, I'm happy. So
that's all right. I just want to. There was one thing that you said somewhere on page 3 around Bishop behind the scenes, and that could be misrepresented by inferring that Chris Bishop is behind the scenes in this influence in this process.
Yeah,
and I just want to put on record that is not the case.
If I could clarify that, when I rocked through the various legislation, I found his name at the bottom of virtually every document pertaining to this from the 15th of December 2025 up until May 2026. So whether it's accident or design, that's the reality of what's happened to the legislation.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, but the way you said it, it could have inferred that it was from a council perspective.
Well,
I just want to say that it's not. So
that's where I got it from.
Yeah, I appreciate what you said, but I've got Councillor Faulkner and then Megan Mackay, and then we'll close off.
Thank you, Peter. That was really interesting. As I was driving into town today, I was listening to the news, and there was a article being spoken about at Tongariro fishing, where they've increased the trout limit from 6 to 8, and then in a lake that does get a little bit warm in the summer, they've changed the rationale around banning fishing on that lake so that there can be more take. And the argument was that the trout were their species that they eat, the smelt, were getting severely depleted. So they want to increase the trout take. So I know there's different areas and different environments and different drivers. So you, on page 1, you were talking about the smelt being degraded. So can you talk to that part?
Yes, I'd like to. Thank you. Stockwell smelt is on the ICUN red listed species of endangered species, and at around 2015 it was recorded as geographically restricted, abundant, and that meant because it only existed in the world between the North Canterbury Waiau River and the Waitaki. Now, if it's not extinct, it's on the brink of extinction. Why I say keystone species was that little fish was so prolific that it used to come in black bands, and it fed all the gulls, not all the species, but thousands of black-billed gulls, the most endangered bird in the world, white-fronted terns, of course shoals of beauty sea trout, which is why I was there, and every other sort of small fish-eating bird and animal that lived in that vibrant ecology that was the Lower Rakai River, and that is no more.
Okay, Councillor Megan Mackay.
Kia ora, Dr. Trolove. Look, I've heard your concerns about Part A, and also, but my question's about the freshwater planning pathway. So my understanding is Schedule 1 and the freshwater planning pathway both have public notification, they have submissions and evidence in a hearing process, and that the main point of difference is really about the panel makeup and timeframes and appeal rights. And I just wanted to know, given both do require public hearings, what's the main concern with the freshwater planning pathway?
Use your microphone.
Oh, sorry. I suppose I've become a cynic, but my life lately has been writing submissions to select committees and being rejected from being able to speak to them. And the time frames, basically, they're just not unfair. And I think Plan Change 8, as I read it, the potential for the way to go, not the way it's purported to the public in the press this morning, is a much bigger item than people understand.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trolove, for
Thank you for
your presentation to us. We've got some resolutions on the screen. I hear what you're saying about mistrust in the systems, and it is widespread, and I acknowledge what you've said in that space. So we've got a resolution here on the screen. Do I have a mover for this to receive and write back to Deputy Chair Cromwell and Councillor Gerard?
I'll have.
All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you very much again for bringing your concerns and your thoughts to us. Appreciate it. Now moving into 4.3, petitions. I haven't received any extraordinary and urgent business. I haven't been notified of any of those. Notices of motion. We have received one notice of motion from Councillor Davies. Councillor Davies is online here. The notice of motion is that requests the Chief Executive to bring a report to the July 2026 Council meeting on options for resolving the recommendation of the previous Council made on the 19th of September 2024. Councillor Davies, do you want to say a few words about this before I ask for a seconder?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's just a governance procedural matter that stems out of the 24 review, whereby that council recommended to this council to consider doing a representation review. A second one in the space of 3 years, which was unconventional as a result of the population growth in Selwyn, and also to align it with the city council. With the simplification of local government, it now is somewhat of a unnecessary step. So I initially moved a revocation motion that was signed by 5 councillors, and this was also, governance looked over it, and we considered it to be somewhat inappropriate, because revoking a recommendation is slightly odd. So we've wordsmithed it. This is the solution, is to get a report in July that basically will be governance's response to that recommendation, which I imagine will be to say that that recommendation is no longer in place for this council. However, there is the caveat, of course, as we all know, in this time that we're in the event of a change of government, I suspect that council may have to look at this next year.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Does anybody have any questions of Councillor Davies on his notice of motion? I don't see any questions. May I have the resolution up on the screen? And while that's happening, have I got a seconder that would look at seconding this? Councillor Campbell. So there is the resolution, and also the resolution that Councillor Davies was discussing. So now we've got a mover and a seconder for this. We will go into debate. Is there anybody that wants to say anything on this? Councillor Davies has already said something. Is there anybody else that wants to say anything? Councillor Scott.
Yeah, I think it's reasonably interesting, Joe, that you've done this, but it may be an opportunity to have a look what form is once we're a bit more clear of that, and possibly that we're all a bit confused about where we might sit and where people might sit across the region. So I think it's an opportunity to also do that. So yeah, I support it.
Could be a conversation for next month when this comes back. Okay, without anybody else wanting to say anything, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Aye. That's carried. Thank you, Joe, for bringing that to us. Item 7.1, unconfirmed minutes, Council 26 and 27 of May. That was our annual plan and council meeting. Any matters from those that have been thought of? No? Then I'll get those resolutions up on the screen. And if I can have a mover to pass those minutes. Councillor Ward and Councillor Faulkner, seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. All right, now we're into the report items for decisions. First off is the adoption of the annual plan. This is on pages 24 to 28 of the agenda and pages 27 to 176 of the separately circulated attachments, which, just for the record, are part of the agenda. As some people have questioned how big our agendas are, the separately circulated attachments are part of our agendas. Amy Allison, Director of Strategy and Planning, Carmen Marsh, Organisational Performance Manager, and Pip Moore, Principal Advisor, Organisation Performance, will introduce this report. Amy, over to you.
Morena councillors and those of us joining online. The purpose of this report is to ask council to adopt the annual plan, which must be adopted by 30 June 2026 under Section 95 of the Local Government Act 2002. As already agreed by you, this annual plan is a responsible minimal change plan, and it keeps council focused on the direction already set through the long-term plan 2024 to 34, while also making targeted adjustments where circumstances have changed. So it basically a needs-must approach. It builds directly on the long-term plan, which was developed through full community consultation and established the council's long-term priorities, work program and financial direction. The plan, therefore, provides continuity and stability in changing times for you all, for us and for the community. And it also responds carefully to current economic pressures, delivery risks and uncertainty. A steady as she goes plan with fiscally responsible, lowest as possible rates. So Carmen will briefly recap the annual plan process that we have run you through many times, but for the last time. And Pip will speak to the changes included in the final version. Before I do that, on behalf of my team and my colleagues, I thank you all for your considered questions and respectful challenges to get to this point. Thank you. Carmen.
Thank you, Amy, and good morning, councillors. So, as you'll all be aware, you've been closely involved in the process to develop the annual plan, starting with workshops at the end of 2025 and then the review of the draft plan in January at the start of this year. On the 25th of February, the Council adopted the draft plan for engagement with the community, and this engagement process was undertaken between the 27th of February and the 31st of March. In total, we received 119 responses on the draft plan, and the feedback was broadly positive to neutral, with only 13% of respondents saying they were opposed to what we included in the draft annual plan. In addition to this, there were 35 different individuals and groups who spoke to councillors during the informal Kapa and Karero sessions held in early May, which allowed an opportunity to interact in a different way with the members of our community through the development of this plan. Through deliberations on the 26th of May, the Council made some clear refinements to the draft plan, informed by the community views, essential service delivery, rates, affordability, and external uncertainties. These refinements are reflected in the final version put to you today for adoption. So thank you very much for all your hard work over this time and to get to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Good morning, councillors. So this final annual plan, it's financially responsible and it funds essential services and maintains a sustainable revenue path and keeps the overall rates revenue increase low. So that 2.4% rates revenue increase means that we will collect 2.4% more rates this year than what we collected last year. So last year, or for the current year actually, 2025-26, we collected $206 million in rates revenue, and so for 2026-2027, we'll collect $211 million in rates revenue, 2.4% more than that. Of course, individual rates increases will vary depending on the rating district in which a person resides and the services that are available in that district. And examples of those rates can be found in this document between pages 107 onwards. So yeah, I want to make sure that that's clear. This annual plan document targets adjustments that support biodiversity, flood resilience and public transport, areas where community value, service need and risk are highest. It takes a pragmatic approach to transport improvements, allowing key service improvements to progress while managing funding risks, including the use of reserves if required to support delivery. Taken together, these changes strike the right balance. They maintain the core work program, respond to areas of greatest need, and preserve affordability for ratepayers. Adoption today is necessary. Without adoption, the Council will not be able to meet its statutory deadline and would not be able to set rates for 2026-27, affecting its ability to operate. In summary, this is a responsible, affordable, and deliverable plan. It maintains essential services, makes targeted adjustments where they are most needed, keeps the overall rates increase low, and enables Council to meet its statutory obligations. Staff therefore recommend that the Council adopts the annual plan 26-27.
Thank you so very much. I've got questions from Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you very much for this. I'm very, very pleased to see get to the stage, and this is a hypothetical question from a first-term councillor. If in the community there was an approach that would cost, I'll throw a figure, $1 million to rectify, how would that be resolved, and how would that impact the annual plan or the long-term plan in the future, or would it be debt funded out of reserves?
That would very much depend on the specifics of the situation you're talking about. So once we set this annual plan, this sets our work programs and budgets for the year ahead. We can't change what's in that, but there are mechanisms for Council to make adjustments throughout the year using other funding mechanisms, but it would really depend on the particular situation you're talking about. So it could also be a conversation for the long-term plan process, which will kick off in the next few weeks. That would depend on the time frame as well as to what you're talking about.
Councillor Mackay, Megan?
My question was answered. So it was about the impact of rates on individual rating, and I think you clarified that really well. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Gerard.
Just to clarify, if we urgently decide to deal with Purple Willow, as we brought up the subject at our last meeting, and it was to be $1 million to do it, and we needed to start the program of work this year because it's every year we leave it, it's going to get 5-10 times worse. So say, I'm just sort of I'm conceptualizing here. But if we needed that money urgently, can we pull it down from reserves?
If the Council decided that it wanted to pursue that course of action, then we'd have to look at what work could be reprioritised, deprioritised to enable that, what the funding mechanisms are. So I don't know the reserve balance available in the biosecurity reserves off the top of my head, but it really would be a council decision. If you wanted to pursue that course of action, then what mechanisms are available to do that and how could it be funded? That would be a council decision.
Thank you for that question. Is there any other further questions on this? Otherwise, I'll ask for a mover. And I've got one through Councillor Scott's asked to move this, and then Councillor Sunkel for a seconder. First, I should say thank you very much, team, for your work. You can step back from the table, but I just really want to acknowledge the amount of work that also the staff do in generating these plans, and going through this to get to the point that we've got to has been really good work, so thank you so much. So now we've got a mover in a second and we'll move into debate. I'll ask Councillor Scott to open the debate.
I too am happy, Dion, that we've got ourselves to here, and I endorse your thanks to staff. And I think I was very impressed with the financial information that we received all the way through this, on the back of what we were requiring, and the discussions that we had around that. I think that put everybody's mind at rest. And thank you, Stephanie, for this this process, because I think it's something that it's a good outcome. We had a coherent process, and although we don't agree on every single little thing that we have here, I think the people of Canterbury should be reasonably pleased with us. And I think the other thing is that the rates on individual ratepayers will differ around the 2.5. So in some areas it'll be 2.5 straight, but in other areas it might be cents actually. So thank you, well done.
Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, my thanks to Chief Executive and the staff for being extremely willing participants in this process, where we started off at 17% as in our previous plans, and through circumstance, through hard work and a bunch of things, we've got ourselves to the position we are in today. There's an argument that we could always gone further and cut more out. Valid argument, but we have landed where we have landed, and I think we have done a particularly good job in getting to that point, given the wider conversations within the community and where the government is speaking of rates, caps and the like. So to be able to achieve the functions that we need to do, get that work out the door with the rate rise that we have, I think it's great. So once again, thank you to the staff for getting us to this point.
Any further comments? Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be a Grinch in the room, whereas I do applaud the staff, Stephanie's team, for pulling back the overall rate rise to 2.4%. I'm conscious of the fact that this is based on last year's budgeted numbers, this year's budgeted numbers, this current year's budgeted numbers rather than the actual numbers. The actual numbers show a $16 million surplus, some of which is due to Stephanie's team's hard work and driving efficiencies and doing things better. Some of it is unspent money from programs already planned. But the 2.4% increase in rates means that actually we're not keeping the pressure on the organisation to keep driving those efficiency gains, and I'm concerned we are budgeting. This budget tells me we must be budgeting for a significant surplus if we can maintain the efficiencies driven out of this current year into next year, in which case we haven't recognised that those retained earnings. And the staff in applauding this plan enunciated my concerns, and that is that this is a continuation of the long-term plan. In October, we went to local body elections, and there was a very strong message, especially out of provincial Canterbury, that ratepayers wanted significant change in attitude to spending their money through local body government. And we haven't had the opportunity to do that, other than bank or potentially bank the efficiencies that Stephanie's team have already delivered. We haven't been able to go through the program and say, actually, are the programs here we should have cut to recognise the voters' view on what we should have done. And in particular, in the Selwyn district, I'm disappointed in in our bus services, there was a strong message that there should be a greater degree of user pays. And yet we have a flat fare system, which in my view, I think we should have addressed. That flat fare system pretty much killed off before it even started the innovative solution of having Bedford supplying a private service to deliver bus services from the people of Rolleston. But because of our flat fare and very low fare recovery model, it seems to me that we didn't really give that trial, that innovative solution a proper crack at providing the service. And I note that if you have an inner city townhouse within the inner city here, where you, by nature of argument, you don't need a public transport service, you are actually paying, depending on the value of your property, somewhere between $800 and $1,200 a year in rates to subsidise bus transport from the outer suburbs coming into Christchurch. And there's some issues here which I think we've been negligent in not addressing in terms of fairness to our ratepayers. So I don't believe we've gone far enough in this annual plan.
Councillor Law Gerard.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you to the staff for all the preparation of this plan, and especially the engagement consultation process. We had really good feedback from submitters that they really appreciated that more relaxed, informal engagement. I'm really think we've done a good job for value to ratepayers, and obviously I would have liked the Purple Willow to have been up front and in there with the at least starting off with 200,000 to get cracking, but so be it. We're having to probably go into our reserves, but that's all right. So thank you for it all, and let's get on with it.
Councillor Campbell. Yep.
Well, I wasn't going to speak, but seeing as all the commentary so far has been about how good it is that we've got a very low percentage, I thought in the interests of balance I should offer a different perspective. Mm-hmm. Rates pay for stuff to be done, and the lower the rates increase, the less stuff we can do. I absolutely fully acknowledge the widespread economic and financial concern around the country at the moment. But I also acknowledge the questions that I see being asked in many fora about what have we not done that we could have done. What actions do the community want us to take that because we are settling on a low rates increase, we are not taking? I absolutely accept where we've landed with this annual plan, but at the same time, I sincerely hope that when we come to set our long-term plan, that we start from a point not of how little can we spend, but on what does the community want us to do? What do we need to do? What does the environment need us to do? And how can we do that as effectively and efficiently as possible? It's not one or the other, it's both.
Any further, Councillor Claire Mackay?
Thank you very much. I will support this 2.4%. Look, I agree a little bit with Councillor.
Second time. You're doing good. No, sorry, I'm just saying.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I wasn't listening. Look, I have some degree of sympathy for the views from Councillor Mackenzie, and I would like to see it, but I do want to acknowledge the efficiencies that CE Stephanie and the team have brought to us, and I still think there is some more opportunities. But this is a good start for the building blocks for the long-term plan discussion that we'll be launching into very soon. I think that as a councillor that sat here for 10 years, when I first started, a 1% increase was 600,000. A 1% increase in the current year we're in, going from now until next year, is actually 2.06 mil, and so from we're actually another 1% is 2.11 going forward. So every year a 1% increase actually collects more rates revenue. So then I just think about the last speaker, Councillor Campbell, and I respect her comments there around rates pay for stuff to be done. But I definitely want to drive for efficient and effective use of our ratepayer funds. And I guess I just do ask myself is that every year we hear from a relatively small proportion of our community, and I think that we do need to be aware of what the balance of the broader community is also feeling. And you did touch on the cost of living in that respect. So interesting times ahead. Going to support this one, 2.4. I think that I really do appreciate the work the staff have done to get it to this level. So thank you.
Councillor Ward.
I appreciate all the work that the staff and the CEO have done on this and getting this rate level down to where it is. I mean, I, like Councillor Mackay, have voted against rate rises in the past. I do sympathise with. I think that we could even bring this down even lower. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about efficiencies and being effective in the way we use our money. And I mean, we all have must-haves, needs and wants, but we need to also have priorities. And as Claire's alluded to, 1% is another, $2 million in rate increase in times where lots of people are facing in our community huge inflationary increases in the annual operating costs of their businesses.
Councillor Robinson and then Councillor Cramwell, and then I'll come back to Peter to finish up.
I hope you can see and hear me. It's terrible connection here. Okay. Sorry, I've just got a cleaner who's come. Sorry. Apologies. I am going to follow through with my previous comments on this. I do not support the limiting of the rates. And as Ashley Campbell said before, we need to do. And, being at the EDF's conference this morning, there's a lot of things that really hit home here. And it feels like that we're restricting certain things and primarily repairing constantly, and we can't keep going forward like this. I understand why we're here. It doesn't mean I support it. But basically, we've got to do a bit better than this, and this is not it. So I won't be supporting it today.
Councillor Deputy Chair Cramwell.
Kia ora tātou. I did like in our discussion that we did look at the contestable fund and raise it by 100,000. As we know, our taiao, our biodiversity is always under pressure. So that was a small win. We did drop from 2.9 to 2.4. However, during that as well, we did look at our river resilience and the Waimakariri stock banks, and look at 2 million for that, because think about the amount that how it protects our infrastructure, but also similar to Councillor Campbell, just to look at having Aranui bus, the opportunity to look at our community there, and also the uplift on Route 1 and Route 5, because we've seen the outcomes of the uplift on Route 7. And then being able to get more people on the buses, less people in cars, is always great for the environment and for Christchurch as well. So on that, I will be supporting the annual plan. Kia ora.
Just before I hand back to Councillor Scott as the mover to close the debate, I just want to say again appreciation to Stephanie and to the team, and you've done a great job, because we were starting when we were handed. This council was handed this annual plan. We were staring down the barrel of about 17%. That was what the last council we inherited, and then we've worked through that. We've got to the point we've got to. I acknowledge that we can always do more. I acknowledge that we can always try and do better. There is different views about how you prioritise money, and that is always going to be the case. But as a team, we come together, we put something on paper, we talk to our communities, and then we come to a place that we can work with. And I think we've got to that place, and I recognise, again, that there are places and things that people want to do. Let's work together to try and find ways to do those things, and I'm committed to trying to do what we can do for the right reasons. In terms of public transport, I'm really pleased about the 1 in 5. I think this is really putting a stake in the ground in Canterbury and saying, you know what, we actually think public transport is important. Well, Christchurch, we do, and I really want the government to step up and play their part. They need to come to the party on this. We have a growing Greater Christchurch area, and we are saying that, and we're going to continue that work to do it. In terms of how much people pay for public transport in a city, a house, if it's worth $1.5 million, would be paying $350 a year in their rates, $353.65. That is the contribution to having your buses and availability for public transport. I really want to just also draw attention to page 109 of the annual plan, which is page 135 of our separately circulated agenda. This page, to me, is the picture that paints it. This is the first time I've been in this council where we've had a balanced budget. And that, to me, is really important, and it's really good news. And I want to say thank you to making us get to that point. And the other one that I think is really critical here is our debt servicing level is 1%. 1% of our revenue is what we're paying for debt. We've got a very, very well-managed books for this council, one of the best in the country from what I've seen. And I think as a council, this council and all the councils in the past, they should take that on board and say, you know, you've done a good job at managing the books in this place. And that's what we need to be taking into the next conversations with our friends within the TAs, because this is a good run council to pass on. Yes, we can always do better, and let's aim for that. So in that, I will pass over to Councillor Scott to close.
Thanks, Chair. I wasn't going to say anything, but I must say that I was so impressed with Councillor Mackenzie's Damascus moment on PT, where I haven't heard him speak with so much passion like that in the 6 or 7 years he's been here. So well done to you. And maybe you're a future lead for public transport. You maybe threaten Joe. But I'd also just like to mention the fact that we're in a different time now. We're in year 3 of our long-term plan. And just to reiterate what you've said, Dion, I think we're right. We've done our job here. We've got a balanced budget. Our cost of debt is low. There's plenty of opportunity there. I talked about predating of our balance sheet, and so hopefully that doesn't happen too soon. And just to speak to you, Ashley, I think that long-term plan process is the right process. We agreed that we would do it this way as a group, and we've got to where we are. But now the gloves are off when we start the long-term process. So that's when you get the opportunity to put your stuff on the table better than what you are. But well done to everybody. And I'd just like to, again, acknowledge staff saying, look, we're in different times here. Things are going to change. And we know in early August, we're going to get a reasonable indicator from RMA changes and also Head Start processes about, what our job's going to look like. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against?
Yes, I'm against. Genevieve Robinson.
And Councillor Mackenzie is abstaining. Passed. Carried. Thank you. Item 8.2, Rates Resolution. This is Giles, Director Corporate Public Transport, and Grant McKenna, General Manager of Finance and Assurance, who introduced this report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a paper that statutorily is required for Council to approve to strike the rates so that we are able to instruct the territorial authorities to collect those rates on our behalf from the 1st of July. And it's quite a lengthy document, as you will have seen, but myself or Grant are happy to answer any questions.
Giles, can you please explain to us that this is the critical bit, the nuts and bolts, and if we make changes to this, what then happens?
So ultimately, this resolution passes, allows us to meet the statutory deadline and allows us to collect rates from the 1st of July. Any changes to this document would require extensive reworking, particularly by the finance team, which would therefore need to come back to Council to be restruck, and therefore would delay us collecting rates and would put us at statutory breach of the requirements to have the rates set before the 1st of July.
Thank you. Any questions of Giles for this paper? No. So can I please have the resolutions on screen? That's a good sign that we've had no questions there. So thank you. The paper was self-explanatory. There's a lot of resolutions. I will just get those on the screen if possible, please. My intention is to go through all of the resolutions to pass them all as one, but can we just go to the top of the resolutions and just, for benefit of anybody who's looking, just go through and scroll, just so you can see the level of resolutions that we are passing here. And if you just use that arrow button and just go right down to the bottom so that it's been seen on the screen. You might want to go faster because Christmas is coming. There's a lot, and this is all technical stuff. It's on the agenda that's in front of you. So if anybody watching online, that's the detail of a regional council's rating scheme, and that is the bit that's going to be interesting. Rightio. So that's back to the bottom. May I please have a mover for this? Councillor Andrea Davis, a seconder, Councillor Faulkner. Any debate or discussion? Okay, no discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you, team. Now to item 8.3, proposed plan changes to the regional plans. This is on page 63 to 74 of the agenda. This is pages 177 and to 347 of the separately circulated attachments, with recommendations on page 63 and 64. Amy Allison, Director of Strategy and Planning, Lisa Jenkins, Regional Planning Manager, and Zella Smith, Principal Planning Advisor, and Jackie Todd, who is an external, will introduce this report. And come to the table, everybody.
Morena again, councillors and those who are joining us online. Today we're asking Council to decide whether to proceed or not to proceed with plan changes that seek to better enable the change in use of water in fully or over-allocated catchments, the interception of groundwater for the development of critical infrastructure, and the construction of wetlands. We refer to these changes collectively as Plan Change 8. Plan Change 8 was initiated by this council in 2024 to resolve significant issues that arose following a Supreme Court decision related to the planned take and use rules. The court's interpretation of our plan meant some unintended consequences. In some circumstances, we could not grant consent to critical infrastructure development, such as stormwater retention within Christchurch. It also meant that changing uses of water, even when it might be more environmentally beneficial, for example, moving from irrigation of dairy pasture to watering your orchard. That was not always possible. And consent holders could not deliver environmental improvements, for example, converting to less intensive land uses. Also not be able to get the right consents for some existing uses, for example, dairy shed washdown. During the development of Plan Change 8, it was also decided by Council it would be beneficial to amend provisions related to construction of wetlands. It was seen as an opportunity to remove regulatory barriers for people doing environmentally beneficial work. Wetlands are a good thing. In October 2024, early steps in the resource management reform taken by this government meant that they introduced legislation to prevent notification of freshwater plans under the RMA, unless there were exemption criteria met. Further plan process changes were introduced in December 2025 with the intent of preventing councils from pursuing planning work under the RMA system while transition to a new resource management system began, otherwise known as plan stops. Despite these plan stops, this council committed to these common sense amendments, continuing to develop the Plan Change 8 and throughout 2025 continued early engagement with partners and key stakeholders. In December 2025, one of the first decisions this council made was to seek exemption from government to allow Plan Change 8 to be notified and to continue through the RMA development process. We were granted that exemption by the Minister of RM Reform, allowing Plan Change 8 to be notified if you chose to do so. And here we are. So just before I hand over, just to reiterate the key points. Plan Change 8 is a collective term for changes to the Canterbury Land and Water Plan and consequential changes to Hurunui and Waiau Rivers Regional Plan and the Waipara River Regional Plan. We are recommending the Council proceeds with Plan Change 8 and the consequential plan changes. We are also recommending that Council use the freshwater planning process. We've briefed Council twice on this decision, or leading up to you making this decision. Haven't actually made it yet. Once on the 29th April and shortly after we received the exemption for the Minister allowing this decision to be made, and again at a workshop on the 3rd of June. If Council decides to proceed, we're not there yet. This is just for the next stage of the process. If you decide to proceed, and it is your decision, the plan changes will be notified on 4 July and we will accept submissions through to 4 August. The further submissions period will likely begin in September. We'll also work with the Freshwater Commission to establish a hearings panel. So as I said, ultimately it is your decision, but we have done as directed to come this far. We thank everyone who has contributed and engaged on this process so far, those for and those against. In writing and also in the discussions heard in this chamber, and again today. We thank you. I'll now hand over to my team for more detail.
Kia ora. So today we are recommending that you notify Plan Change 8. Notification is the beginning of a public process. By notifying Plan Change 8, you're enabling anyone who is affected by it or anyone who is interested in Plan Change 8 to make a submission and be heard in response to their submission. It allows a panel of experts to consider the submissions and the evidence presented through that hearing and to make recommendations back to you as a council on how that plan change should be shaped. The words will change in the plan change through this process. The process is really there so that people can have their say and can make the plan change work for them. We are really motivated to resolve Plan Change 8 within the term of this council. We understand that there's reform happening and that there is a need to progress as quickly as possible if change is going to be made. So we will be doing what we can to make sure to support a hearings panel, to make sure that recommendations can come back to this council while you're still sitting. Again, we've briefed you several times on this plan change, and we're confident really that the words in the plan change and the intent sort of meet the intent that we were initially instructed to provide, which was to provide pathways that allowed for good uses of resources to be considered where they were maybe not able to be considered in the past. I think it's important to recognise that the change of use pathway is changing to from a prohibited activity status to a non-complying activity status. So there would still be an ability within that to have a full consideration of the impacts of any change of use in a consent process. I just thought that was, following the deputation this morning, I thought that was a point worth making. But I don't think we've got any more opening remarks to make. So,
any further comments from staff? Okay, so we'll move into questions. I have a handful so far. I've got Councillor Megan Mackay, Councillor Gerard, then Councillor Scott, Councillor Campbell, then Councillor Faulkner and Councillor Davis. I'll start, and then Deputy Chair.
Kia ora. So I'm first up. So I just want to acknowledge staff have worked really closely with Runanga and others in the pre-notification process, and that several amendments have been made in light of that, the feedback. I've also had confirmation directly from Naito Hudiri, who expressed a keen interest in Plan Change 8, that they do not oppose moving forward to notification. And so this is just for my own completeness, taking a belts and braces approach just to ask, can staff confirm whether from their perspective, if there's any outstanding issues that have been raised by either mana whenua or other those consultation parties that would make notification premature?
No.
Thank you. Important question, though. Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got a few questions. But first one is just about consultation process. With the freshwater, just the comparison of the consultation process with both options. So when we go through the freshwater panel...
We'll get that answered first, and then we'll go to your next part.
Okay, yeah. First, how many days do they have, again, to submit on? And, is there quite a difference between the two or not, as far as the actual submitters and their input, and how you integrate with the submitters in wordsmithing and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so the process is the same right up until the end of the hearing, when a decision's been made and an appeals, the appeals process starts. So the initial submission period will be 20 working days, and then there'll be a further submission period, which will be slightly shorter, where people can then look at all of the submissions that have been made and support or oppose those submissions.
Great, thanks. So yeah, my next one is about the wetlands, and that's to prevent confusion in the future that could contribute to consenting and compliance costs and unintentional environmental outcomes. So just, with the terminology of constructed wetlands. And I say this because most central and local government projects I've been involved with effluent and stormwater and processing water, we've always called it constructed wetlands. So it's just really, I know it's quite a bit of a hurdle to change that, but I'm just wondering if there's a possibility through the process that could occur.
Sarah,
There's those different types of wetlands. There's habitat wetlands, catchment management wetlands, aquaculture wetlands, and then there's constructed wetlands, for example.
So there's not an ability at this point in the process to change the definitions or the provisions. However, that is part of the whole intent of the hearing process, is to be able to refine and make the plan changes work better for all users.
Thank you. So scrolling down, the thing in front of me again. Yeah, can I come back?
Yes, I'll come back to you. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really happy that we've got this in front of us today. Another big piece of work we can get out the door, and I'm fully supportive of it. My question is around paragraph 44, the difference between Schedule 1 hearing process and the freshwater process. And it says in there, Commissioner, the fresh hearing panel is not limited by the scope of submissions. And I'm just wondering, is there some sort of a can of worms in there somewhere that the Freshwater Commissioner may... I know there's pretty tight guidelines, and I did actually say to Philip before that I was going to ask this. So, yeah, I'm curious, I guess.
I think that's a question best answered by Philip, so I'll make some space for him to give to the table.
Oh God, the two C's just parted.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Thanks for the heads up on the question. So it's a question about what it means for there to be no scope restrictions on the Freshwater Commission if that option is chosen by the council. And as I understand the question, it's about how far does that go? Is it potentially in and of itself opening up a can of worms as to what these plan changes might develop into as this process unfolds through that process, in contrast to a normal Schedule 1 process where scope is limited to the plan changes as notified and what people ask for in submissions. So the question is how much scope or how far beyond scope might the freshwater panel go, and does that present as a risk? Having reflected on that and having looked at the clauses in the schedule of the RMA that establishes the freshwater planning process, my view is that there is the ability for the freshwater panel to go slightly beyond scope, but I wouldn't consider it a significant risk in terms of going radically beyond the scope of submissions. And the reason I've formed that view is because immediately after the appeal sections in the schedule, you see clause 57, and that preserves the right to judicially review a decision which is made. And judicial review is one of the protection mechanisms in terms of the principles of natural justice. And linking that back to scope, if a panel were to go radically beyond scope, that would produce or result in natural justice considerations being at play, decisions and recommendations made that people didn't have an opportunity to participate in, which would give rise to the risk of judicial review. So I see a limit on that power, limited by the principles of natural justice, which adds the layer of protection necessary such that the risk is not significant.
Just further to that, in terms of scope, and I fully understand that in terms of the natural justice point of view, is it likely, though, that the panel may be concerned about something and give advice after the decision, or is it just a decision?
I'm not sure that I'm following that, actually. So the scope issue, as in when can they use the extra powers, so to speak, it would be making a recommendation to change Plan Change 8 or 1 or 2 beyond that which was sought in a submission. And an example, I was thinking about, well, where might this actually come into play? It might be that there's a need to put an additional condition on something. Nobody's asked for that, but it's the sensible thing to do. And it may not be something that people would object to. In the ordinary course of events, you couldn't just add another condition onto a matter. But here, if it's the right thing to do, the recommendation may well be to add a further condition. So that's where I think the power might be used.
So having said all that, Philip, so it should be clear and certain when we get some sort of decision.
Yes, it will be, and I would expect a panel, if it makes a decision, a recommendation, I should say, beyond scope, it will need to clearly signal that, because the appeal rights are different in relation to that.
Just Philip, just for the completeness of the meeting, who are you?
Oh, sorry, Philip Moore, barrister.
Philip Moore, and you are
legal counsel for the council in relation to these plan changes.
Excellent, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Councillor, you finished now, Peter? Excellent. Councillor Campbell.
I've got two sets of questions, and the first one is kind of along the lines of what has just been asked about the different pathways. First of all, could you comment on why you're recommending the freshwater pathway, what benefit you see in that? And the second part of that is, can you tell us for each pathway what sort of time frame we're looking at before the plan change would become operational? That's first lot, so I'll let you do that first.
We're recommending the freshwater planning process because the limited appeal rights mean we should have a final decision quicker than if we followed the Schedule 1 process. As Lisa alluded to in the beginning, if we use that process, we would be doing our utmost to work with the panel to get a final decision for you within your term. The Schedule 1 process, we will almost certainly take longer because of the full appeal rights, but it's very difficult to say how long that would actually be.
Thank you. Now, my second questioning relates to the Section 32 analysis, which I haven't printed out in full, but I have printed out bits of it and highlighted bits of it. And basically, I've printed out pages 45 to 54, which is the costs and benefits of each option, where option 2 is what you're recommending, and option 3 is remaining with the status quo, and option 1 is going further and faster. And so in reading this, I found several statements that I found in my mind conflicted, and I would like some clarity on this. So if I go right to the end of that, to page 54 in the analysis, paragraph 180, and I'll just read out a bit. It's unknown how many consent holders will take the opportunity to apply as a non-complying activity to change what they use water for, and the impact that this might have on water markets and water trading. Okay, so we don't know that. Then it says, however, the proposed rules include conditions to ensure that there is no increase in the rate and amount of water taken, or the consented allocation of water in over-allocated catchments. The bit that I'm particularly interested in there is the rate and the amount of water taken. So it seems to me that this is saying there will be no increase in the rate and amount of water taken. However, if we go back to pages 46 and 47, under 46 under the first option 2, separate consent pathway for interception of groundwater. It says, similar to option 1, this option could enable new takes of groundwater in fully or over allocated zones or catchments with an associated environmental cost. It then goes on to explain that there would be rules, hopefully trying to mitigate that. And then on 47, again, the same. Similar to option 1, this option could result in new takes of groundwater in fully or over allocated catchments, again with the mitigations part coming under this. So in my mind, we've got two conflicting statements there. We've got at the back conclusion saying there cannot be increased rates or amounts taken. And those two paragraphs saying in some circumstances there can be. Can you draw that out for me and perhaps explain what the confusion might be?
Yes, and thank you. We'll look at that wording again just to check that confusion. I think some of the confusion is, some of that is about the set of rules enabling change of use, and the rules there are really strict that there cannot be any increase in the rate of take or the volume allocated. And then there's a separate set of, and I understand we've mixed that terminology up, so we will look at this. And then there's a separate set of provisions for the interception of groundwater for infrastructure, and they could potentially allow new takes of groundwater for that activity. And we've tried to avoid that resulting in over-allocation, and I'll just check. I think it's the definition of the interception of groundwater. No, sorry, it's the... Yeah, it's the policy guidance for when someone needs a resource consent to intercept groundwater for infrastructure operation. There's a clause in there that was added in response to clause 3 and 4A feedback that clarifies that the interception of groundwater won't be counted within the allocation limits if that water is essentially remaining in the system. So it's intercepted but not removed from the system. And then that works with the definition of the interception of groundwater that says that the interception of groundwater is just where you incidentally intercept groundwater but you don't physically pump it and remove it from the system. And so I guess there's a difference there between being able to take groundwater in that situation where you're not physically removing it from the system, and we're proposing that that's not counted in the over-allocation limit, so it's not increasing over-allocation. And then the take and use rules, the change in use rules where no increase can occur.
I just ask for clarification to make sure that my mind is clear. Hypothetical situation. You've got farmer X or brewer Y or whatever who has consent for an allocation of which they are using 20% and have consistently been using 20% for the past however many years. They apply for a change of use. They have to give up some of the consented allocation in order to have that change of use, but they could still increase the take from their current 20% to 40% or 45%. my understanding of reading them and of the surrender that has to be given is that in that case where someone is using a small amount of their consented take, they have to give up some to change the use, but that they could still increase their take from what they're using now. Is that correct?
There is policy guidance to try and avoid that situation. And so the policy guidance in that situation says that the amount of water that they are given going forward with the change in use is the lesser of three things. And those three things is the reasonable and efficient amount of water for that proposed use, 90% of what they could previously take before, or the maximum, sorry, I'm just checking the provisions, the maximum annual or seasonal volume used within the past 10 years as demonstrated with actual use records. So in the example that you quote, that policy, the actual use records would probably turn out, that 20% would turn out to be the lesser amount of those three things. And that guidance should require that the amount going forward is pulled down to that 20%.
So that relies on on that being stipulated within our not reconsenting but change of use approval. Is that?
That's correct. So that would be taken into account by the council planner processing the consent, and then that would translate into a consent condition limiting that maximum volume to that amount, and in some cases the rate. That policy guidance would allow for the rate to be considered. And we do have some good examples of the current consent planning staff enacting similar policies already around actual use, and I'm aware of at least one example where a consent was declined based on actual use records showing that water really hadn't been used in the past. So I guess as someone that's worked within that consenting section, I am confident that those policies carry significant weight in the consent process.
Any further questions, Councillor Campbell? Okay, so I'll go back to Councillor Gerard, then Councillor Faulkner.
Yeah, just following up from what Councillor Campbell was saying, it might be quite a lot of use this year so that people can get their quotas up. The question I have is, when we have the matters of discretion for the interception of groundwater for infrastructure, and that, yeah, it's a question around permitted and non-complying matters and how you assess it. And so matters of discretion for the interception of infrastructures, minimise effects for Ngā Tahu values and other takes, including community supplies, saltwater intrusion, aquatic ecosystems, and no contamination to groundwater. And I'm just wondering if that applies to the change in land water use, and using your dairy shed example, where irrigation is used for the effluent washdown. How do we protect the groundwater aquatic ecosystems to support life-supporting capacity of water in that system? So it's sort of like, do you take what those matters into the when assessing the change of use?
The short answer is yes, all of those matters can and would be considered for the non-complying activity, which is the change in use. And the reason for that is, so a restricted discretionary activity, the matters for discretion that the council can consider are limited, and they have to be specified in the rule. So that's why they're specified in that rule, which I think is the interception of groundwater. For a non-compliant activity, everything is on the table, all effects can be considered, and so they don't need to be specified in the rule. And what that means is that all effects and all policies in the regional policy statement, the regional plan, everything is in there and can be considered and taken into account.
This question is about building resilience for the future for our water resource management, and how will how do you think this plan change will assist in when we have changing hydrological budgets and changing pattern of land use within catchments? And so that's one question. And then the other one is a question around will this enable changes in the water permitted take use from lake storage? And I'm thinking about AI data centres, which have quite a different pattern of use. They have a year-round use where irrigation has seasonal use, and sometimes it's fluctuating from year to year. So how do we manage those bigger resource equations? Thank you.
For the first part of your question, which I had in my head and now I've forgotten.
It's around changing hydrological budgets and changing patterns of land use within a catchment. How do we do you think it's going to be enough to manage it, sort of like, or are we still going to have the over-allocated problems moving forward?
If I take a step back, I think the first part of your question was actually around resilience and how this works towards building resilience. So this change, if it proceeds, will actually enable water users to make changes that could increase the resilience of their activities for their economic benefits, while also looking at environmental risk and constraint. Regarding the hydrological catchments and patterns of use, as a non-complying activity, we do get to have a full assessment of the budgets and efficiency of the water use. However, in saying that, that broader conversation about should we prioritise one use above another use is something that will be looked at and considered in the next planning round if we're enabled to do that.
Okay, Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you for that. I've got two questions. One, and before I do that, the first one's related where I have an interest in a Mihi irrigation company. I'm a shareholder there. So I note on page 65.8, the rules in Plan Change 8 will have immediate effect on the date of notification. Now, a Mihi irrigation are looking at doing wetland construction, so they indicatively talking about a 30% reduction and then going into the Huronui. So from what I'm reading there, from the date of notification, they could start implementing those wetlands.
So the date of notification, both sets of rules, so the existing sets of rules and the proposed sets of rules will have legal effect. But where the existing rules are more stringent, so require a consent pathway versus don't require a consent pathway, is the more stringent rules which will prevail. And because this plan change is generally creating more enabling pathways for these activities, the less enabling pathways will likely prevail until the plan becomes operative. Yeah.
Councillor, have you got another one?
Yeah, second question. And that relates to our deputation from Dr. Peter Trolove. And I look at page 2 on his presentation and paragraph 7. It disturbs me that staff are leading the council on pathway to freshwater commissioner for the sake of cost, etc. And then on page 3, I think the fourth to last paragraph, he made a statement, public will react. and then I go to the same issue that Peter Scott was talking to about the freshwater panel. So would Dr. Trolove have comfort that the whole process is going to be robust and that those concerns will be heard?
Yes, absolutely. The freshwater process remains the same right up until the appeals process, and the piece that's cut out there is Environment Court appeals on merit. There will still be appeal rights on points of law that can go through the High Courts.
And if I could just add, this is a part of a legislated process. There will be legal counsel, but actually I also stand by the integrity of this organisation and my staff. So with respect, I rebut the view that we would act in any way other than with integrity.
Councillor Davis.
Oh, thank you. Right. My question is about speed. And it is about, because I read the Whakatau Times and they're saying Federated Farmers saying we don't want any plan changes. And I know we had direction from central government saying no plan changes. And now here we are and we want to go as fast as we can. So is that because we want to be in under the old RMA and have a 2-year shelf life because there's a new thing coming? Can you tell me about the speed?
Yes, it is to get in through the current RMA and to improve the planning system that's going to be in place while we move to the new system. So it really is about doing that as fast as possible, but it's also about making sure that this council gets to make the ultimate decisions on it.
Thank you.
Could I just add, it'll be a really fast snail. It's still not it's not a fast process. What we would turtle. Okay. Slightly faster. I would say I don't want the idea that point that Lisa very clearly made was as fast as possible, i.e. from our perspective, we are committed to being as efficient and as effective as possible and not waste time. It'll be tight but achievable, but we will certainly and absolutely not cut corners, and we will follow the due process, so slow and steady.
Okay, can I just on top of that, so it does rely on, because I would like to have a guarantee that we do have 100% confidence in our understanding of what and how much water is actually being used. So that is to me a little gray here, and we also are working on smart enabling regulator. We're trying to be better. So when we do get that piece of work done, how will that plug in? I'm just worried that there's unintended consequences of someone changing from arable to dairy, more pee, more burping. I know we got the effluent thing covered, but there's unintended consequences. So I just want to know we've got a guarantee that we're 100% sure about how much water is actually being taken. And we're also trying to fix our monitoring and enforcement and looking after the rules. And maybe that's not,
So I think in a broad scale, there's some work to do to get our catchment accounting books looking sharp. They're at a consent by consent level, though. People will have records. They've been metering what they've taken for the last 10 years. People will have records, and without those records, they can't come in and, we can't have a proper conversation. We will be asking for those records as part of the consent decision making. So we will know what people have taken for the last 10 years and be able to make a call about that.
Yes. Dr. Cromwell. Deputy Chair Cromwell. I've written down DC and I looked at it as DR.
I thought you were going to say Dr. Ropata.
Well, this is going to be entertaining.
No. Kia ora koutou. Just on 52 and 53, just on looking at the cost of the planning process. I notice in 53 it says up to $1 million, but then on 52 it talks about there could be chance of appeals. Does that $1 million take into the cost of appeals or not?
No, it doesn't. So that will get us to a decision.
I know, because if we follow the Freshwater hearing process, and then if we support it, there could be appeals on the court of law, but if we don't, it could go through a bigger process. But I'm not too sure if you probably answer this. Just you wouldn't have an estimated cost of what that could be?
The reason we don't generally give you an estimate that includes appeals is because it's really asking how long can a piece of string be, because given just depending on what the appeal is, it'll take a lot of court time or it won't. What we do definitely try to do is try and manage appeals before they really get to court, and we do that through lots of work with stakeholders and partners, and really try and manage that.
Boy, kia ora. Thank you for that. And second question is with regards to, as we know, and similar to Councillor Davies, about because we know we're going through the replacement planning framework at the moment. We've got the new Planning Act and the Natural Environment Act framework kind of coming on us, and it was probably meant to drop on Friday, but who knows when that will be. So in a sense, so if the council agrees on moving PC8, what is the expected useful life of PC8 before its provisions are superseded by the new Planning Act and Natural Environment Act? And has there been considered a cost-benefit assessment as well?
That has been considered, and we've briefed council a couple of times on that. The useful life will likely be about 2 to 3 years. So at the moment, indications are that a spatial plan would be notified in 2028 and a natural environment plan would be notified in 2029. And I expect that the time that it takes for those things to go through the actual process and be heard and become operative will take longer than that. So we're probably talking 2031 by the time we've actually got some sort of solid plan frameworks in place in the new system. So so I think that it's sort of between 2 and 4 years, I think, will be the useful shelf life.
Kia ora, Councillor Robinson.
Well, thank you. I won't be using my camera because the internet's not very good. I'm sorry. So I've just got a couple of questions. They're more about assessments. And so someone has an allocation for water on paper, and in the past they may have used a certain percentage. So, the real extraction of the water of the allocation. So between sort of working on this plan change up until today, do we know the effects of, the triggering of the extra unused allocation, if those people maybe have triggered the extra up until today, and what the effects on the receiving environment could be based on the actual use of water if they go right up to the allocation level? Because I know the 5-year window is that they must have used it within the certain time frame, but if knowing that this was coming has triggered the extra use of the water in that allocation, do we know the real life effects of the use of the allocation? Has that been assessed?
I think, if I understand that, no, it hasn't, because it would be extremely difficult to try and work out what that might actually be, like in terms of what might be the increase. But I would say that sort of behaviour, or that sort of taking sudden increase perhaps in anticipation of these sorts of rules, would be very obvious in the water usage data. So I think those are all things that can be taken into account in the processing of the consent. And as a non-compliant activity, that can be factored in. So if I understand what you're saying correctly, if someone was to start using their water more now to try and get more water in the future when they apply for a change in use. Is that the concern?
Yeah, so yes, and I guess, yes, sorry, and it's not just about the allocation or the water itself, but the receiving environment based on effects management, which leads me to my second part question, because in the provisions in the assessment of Section 32, and I guess the good scenario of using water for a better purpose, we've seen those, where we've described irrigation going to orchard or the likes, but I'm struggling to see the other side of the equation for what could be the worst case scenario, because we're actually relying on the people who hold the consents to do the best with that water, whereas even like for like, consumptive to consumptive or non-consumptive to non-consumptive isn't always actual best outcome. And so I'm wondering, have we got some scenarios for the real world consequences of those?
I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah. I don't think we've got very clear scenarios there, but what I would say is that we've got these rules sit within a wider plan framework that has a whole nutrient allocation or nutrient management part of that framework as well. So, the rules in isolation don't really operate. They operate within the full framework. And I think any change that was going to increase environmental impacts would be captured either by other rules or by these rules, and because it's a non-complying activity, if it was managed by these rules, then significant additional adverse effects would be managed at the consent stage. So we haven't kind of gone to worst case scenario testing and modelling because we think that the plan as a whole manages that worst case scenario.
Okay, no, that's probably all my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems to me we've been relitigating the whole land and water plan rather than just the provision of the taken use provision within the land and water plan. I was wondering if we could get the mystery man back up, because my question is pertinent to him. And
come to the table.
So the original land and water, in Eiffelton plain speak, the Supreme Court judgment was that regardless of the intent of the land and water plan, which was to enable taking use to be separated, the wording in the plan, David Chapper's plan, didn't actually allow that. It didn't say that, and so he ruled against it. My question then is, for the Freshwater panel that will be likely to be hearing this, will they be instructed by the original intent of the land and water plan, or is this are they starting from scratch and have to wade through a whole lot of stuff which is not particularly relevant?
The Supreme Court didn't. I think they said the opposite in terms of what the intent of the plan was. So they said that the intent of the drafters was that taken use would travel together, and that was the interpretation. So if that's what the Supreme Court has said the intention of that plan was, your question then is, does that intention then carry over into the assessment of this particular plan change? And I can answer that swiftly. The Supreme Court was focused on the words as they were in the plan. The change of the plan demonstrates the intent. So the intention here is to allow for a change, and therefore that intent will prevail if it's considered appropriate by the hearing panel. So that underlying concern about the intent of the plan not being allowed to change wouldn't be an issue with respect to consideration of this plan change.
So it's slightly cross purposes, because the Supreme Court might have said the intent of the plan was not to separate taking use. The intent of the plan was to separate was to enable the separation of take and use, and the regional council interpreted it as such for 10 years before the Supreme Court ruled against that. So I guess I'm going back to the original intent of the Land and Water Plan, even if the Supreme Court doesn't think the wording said that.
I think we might take a different view on that. So the Supreme Court found that the intention was that take and use travel together. So that was the intention found. And what Plan Change 8 is seeking to do is to express a different intention in more constrained purposes, that take and use need not necessarily travel together because the change in use can occur. That Supreme Court decision is quite nuanced in terms of the specific provisions, though, that were being considered. The Supreme Court accepted that there were other parts of the plan where use didn't travel with take, so it wasn't an intention across the entirety of the plan. The intention was with respect to the specific rule being challenged in that particular litigation. So that I think we need to be quite careful with talking about an overarching intention of a plan. The Supreme Court hasn't ruled on that aspect.
Councillor Mackay. Claire.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair, just one short question of clarification, I guess, and it stems from some of the conversation over here around the useful shelf life and the economic, the costs of passing this, or if it gets passed, and progressing it. Am I correct in that it would form a building block for any new plans? And I just reflect on the fact that Waikato's plan change has been 13 years in the process, and I think if we can expedite something here, I think that's very helpful. But is that an effective building block? Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, that's an absolutely fair assumption.
Councillor Campbell, and then Councillor Scott, and that's all I've got for the questions at this point in time.
Okay, I'm going to refer back to the questions that I was asking before, because to use a phrase from the lexicon, I've been internalising a very complicated situation inside my head. And so I'm going to try and make that complicated situation inside my head a little clearer for me. Can you say that there will be not excluding incidental infrastructure taken use while infrastructure is being built? Can you say that this plan change will not enable increased take and use of water in Canterbury?
No one seems to want to answer it. Sorry, did you say excluding the interception of groundwater rules?
Yeah, excluding for the incidental interception during infrastructure build. I'm not actually concerned about that. What I'm concerned about is a long-term increase in take and use during a change of use process. Right to the nub of the matter, that's what I'm concerned about. Can you say that this plan change will not enable that?
In planning, there's no guarantees. The notification point is a point where it will get tested more widely to see if we have created some massive holes or if the community see an opportunity to expand the ability to take and use water. We think we're at a point where it's as robust as it can be, but I do appreciate the opportunity to have that further testing in the public forum if you decide that that's the way to go. But again, this only I won't say absolutely not, because this only affects over allocated catchments. So there are catchments where people could take or use more water.
Can I expand?
Well, can I just say one thing? Conversely, this is done on best endeavours, and actually this will be further tested through the submissions process. Equally, some of these changes that are being proposed within Plan Change 8 actually allow for a difference of take and use for less intensive from irrigation to for your orchard. So, equally there's uncertainty. There's an element of uncertainty that it could reduce it. I mean, this is why we're going to be testing it through the submissions process, but also it's based on the science that we have right now. So over to you.
I need to extend the meeting, and then after the extension, I have 3 more people that want to redo questions: Councillor Scott, Gerard, and Mackay, and then we will close then we'll go break. We'll have lunch, and then we'll come back, and then we'll move into the debate part of this. So moved by Councillor Cramwell and seconded Faulkner. Can we just finish off what you were going to say on that part?
Apologies, I was talking. So can you repeat the question, please?
I was just going to say you were going to say another point to Councillor Campbell's what she was asking.
I think it's probably been covered, but what we can say if we're talking about the change in use rules is as proposed or drafted, there is a condition there that says the rate and volume of take cannot increase, so the allocation to that consent cannot increase, and it is a prohibited activity to breach that condition. So as proposed, there's no wriggle room there to increase the allocation to consent for that activity. I think that partly might answer your question.
Councillor Scott, then Gerard.
Look, I'm in agreement with Councillor Mackenzie. This is just a comment. We're trying to relitigate things that aren't appropriate, that are out of scope here. And I'm a bit disappointed that we've gone on for about 35, 40 minutes.
I think councillors are well within their rights to ask questions. So if you've got a question,
yeah, my question is, why are you extending it after lunch for the decision? I've got somewhere to be, and I want to be in the room. So
this is your council day, and I'm surprised that you haven't prioritised a council day to be in your council chamber. So you didn't say that at the start of the meeting, Councillor Scott. Councillor Gerard.
It's just a clarification around storage lakes and the takes. Does it affect Plan Change 8 have any effects on storage?
Plan Change 8 doesn't affect takes, and it won't affect storage unless it's the use of the water stored.
So at the moment, irrigators use lake courage, so they can dial up and get water. So I'm just thinking, that AI data centre could also dial up and get water. So it's really is that a thing in Plan Change 8? Can that happen?
Yes, Plan Change 8 provides a pathway to enable to enable the change of the use of water from, say, a farming activity to a data centre, but the actual amount taken is very unlikely to increase because of the strong policy guidance we've got around not increasing the actual take, and the effects of going from an irrigation season take to a year-long take would be managed, one, by the annual volume and the rate of take, but also by the fact that it's a non-complying activity, and the impact of that change would be considered in a consent process. Yep.
All right, thank you. And given that Councillor Scott has said that he needs to go to a funeral, and I understand those things, we will continue until through the debate, and then once we finish this item, we will then break for lunch. So I think we've gone through questions. Thank you very much, staff, for bringing this paper to us for all of the questions, and answering all of those questions with the best information that you have available to you at the moment. Now we need to move into debate, so you can leave the table. Who wants to move this? Council. So I need to get the resolutions on the screen. And as I indicated earlier, I will take all of the resolutions as one because they are all intersected and they are all part of one package. If you get as they are written, so those are the resolutions. They are in the packs for everybody. I've got a mover that looks like somebody wants to move over here. Councillor Sunkel, seconded by Councillor Ward. So now we're moving to debate. I will ask Councillor Sunkel to open this debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will be very brief. I first thank staff over a considerable period of time, a number of years of finally bringing this to a point where we can go out to the community and consult on a change. And very clearly in my mind, there are unintended consequences of the judicial decision, the use and take of water that has created all manner of challenges through our community, from infrastructure, from territorial authorities to farmers to business, and the ability to achieve environmental outcomes. So very simply, I see this as rectifying an issue that was created by a court decision. We have debated this considerably in questions. We've had significant briefings along the way. I don't think we need to speak any more to it other than commend it to a decision to take to the community for.
Thank you, Councillor Sunkel. Councillor Ward.
I'll keep it brief. I would firstly like to thank staff for bringing this paper to us again today. I mean, as Councillor Sunkel says, we have discussed this at great length before. The Environment Canterbury Plan Change 8 is proposed change to the Canterbury Land and Water Regional Plan, focus primarily on water use, water consents and wetland infrastructure, as it's all been talked about. And I think it allows a change. What it does for us is allows changes to existing water consents, supports wetland construction, and removes barriers for infrastructure projects going forward. So I think these are all positive outcomes for our environment. And so that's why I support this motion today.
Councillor Campbell.
This has been a very complex issue for me to sort out in my head, and I've continued sorting it out with the answers that have been given today. I've thought long and hard about the implications, and what staff have said today have changed my view slightly. I'm all in favour of allowing interception of water for critical infrastructure and would be happy to vote for that. I'm all in favour of making it easier to create more wetlands, and I don't think anyone could disagree with that. I do still have some difficulty with the change of use provisions because the status quo at least means there will not be any more intensification. However, I have taken on board what staff have said. I'm uneasy about this going forward. I know that I was voted on a platform of caring for water, and I know that in my inaugural speech I said that water is the most important issue for Canterbury. There's been some commentary that Plan Change 8 would bring our rules back to what operated for the 10 years before the Awa decision. I think for water campaigners that is not particularly reassuring, because we are where we are now because of our decisions over water. I've had to weigh up against my own values what is important. And I think it's important for me not to abstain on this issue. But I am going to change my vote with strong reservations. And the only reason I'm going to change my vote is because in the submission process, those who have influenced me to be very concerned about this will have the chance to explain with much more evidence and much more eloquently what the concerns are. And I sincerely hope that after that submission process, whatever comes out answers all those concerns. Because if it doesn't, I will be voting against adopting what comes out. But I will now vote for this to be notified.
Councillor Moody. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Moody, you're on mute if you're talking.
Kia ora, Chair. The oldie but a goodie. I've listened with interest to the staff presentations today and the questions from councillors, and been engaged in the whole session. Thanks for giving us the time we need. I've worked through the PC8 material and had conversations with fellow councillors, staff, experts and constituents, and I understand the intent of the plan change, particularly around removing consenting barriers for infrastructure and enabling more flexibility in how existing water permits are used. I can support the infrastructure part and also the wetlands component of PC8, albeit with some reservations about the drafting and how it will work in practice for the wetlands, but hopefully we can work through them in consultation. On the water change of use provisions, my concern is scope. Where the problem being addressed is specific, stormwater basins, transport infrastructure, a targeted amendment could address that without the broader risks. But as currently drafted, the change of use provision applies across agricultural water use and over-allocated catchments, and that's where I have serious concerns. I think PC8 risks enabling further intensification with real consequences for pollution, water use and catchment health. I understand that land use and intensification is meant to be managed through our nutrient allocation rules in the Land and Water Regional Plan. So I recognise that intent, but the water quality data shows those rules are not consistently delivering improved outcomes. If they were, I could be more comfortable with the additional flexibility proposed here, but because they're not, as a governor, I need to consider using every tool available to me to address this and the land use intensification which drives that pollution. So for me, this raises the question of whether we should be enabling change of use in a way that enables ongoing use of the water and over-allocated catchments into the future. Flexibility of use increases the probability that this water will continue to be used if current land uses became uneconomic in the future, rather than that water being returned to the rivers and aquifers in those over-allocated catchments. In practical effect, existing allocation function as a de facto entitlement preserved and redirected to a new use rather than lapsing and reducing the over-allocation. That is a significant shift from our current system where each take and use is assessed together on its own merits, including both the profit and the pollution it will create. Starting to wrap up here, PC8 moves us in the direction, I fear, of private ownership of water, which is the wrong direction. I recognise that consent is not legally a property right, and that substitution still requires consent as a non-complying activity, but their practical effect runs against the NPSFM policy requirement to phase out over-allocation, the very requirement our own Section 32 relies on as a reason that the status quo remains a reasonable option. There's the idea of a clawback that might only be 90% of the original take or actual use over the past 10 years. But we heard in previous briefings from staff how this provision typically deters consent holders from pursuing substitution at all, meaning in practice that's not going to happen to get the environmental benefit or flexibility. And finally, there's a coherence question about PC8 itself. With the removal of Part C of PC8, because PC8 Part C was the part of the plan change that would have set limits on agricultural intensification and intensive winter grazing, set the guardrails for us to operate in for a thriving economy and environment. It was intended to replace freshwater provisions that were lost from the NESFW. So Part C was that mechanism that was intended to address an appropriate intensification, and with it removed, the water change of use provisions risk achieving the opposite of what we set out to do, actually locking in the over-allocation and or intensification rather than putting guardrails around it. So I do not support this plan change, and finally I do not support the freshwater planning process and support instead the Schedule 1 process as it allows more appeals from the public and appeals to the Environment Court on points of merit. Thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
No, thanks, Chair. I'll be semi-brief. Firstly, I think it's clear we do actually need a plan change. I also support parts of this proposal enabling the infrastructure projects where the groundwater is incidentally intercepted, and it makes sense, and reducing barriers to the construction of healthy wetlands appear to address genuine issues. But my concerns still primarily relate to the proposed change of use provisions in a plan that was designed to limit or avoid over-allocation. I hope we're not choosing an approach here that effectively allows the market to allocate water, an approach that gives away our power to determine what activities deserve access to a public resource without having consulted the public ahead of today. We can fix the infrastructure and wetland issues without wholesale change to our taken use rules. And that's what I believe we should be doing. We need a plan change, but it doesn't quite look like the PC8. The reports say the current rules prevent us moving towards better, more sustainable uses of water, and that's correct. But they also prevent us moving towards less sustainable water uses. I think what we need is a plan change that requires any transfer request to deliver better outcomes for communities and the environment, and based on an assessment against outcomes determined by our own communities. For me, this comes down to whether we have fully understood the environmental effects that could result from making existing water allocations more flexible. What are the less desirable outcomes, I ask, and I asked that of staff today, but I'm not satisfied. How might consent holders respond once this pathway becomes available to them? When we create a new planning pathway, we're not only planning for the outcomes we hope to see, we also need to understand the outcomes that may occur if people respond differently than what we expect. And I'm not suggesting that this will happen. I'm simply not convinced I have seen a clear assessment of whether it could happen and what the consequences might be if it does. I have very real questions regarding the groundwater quality today. So this proposal recognises there is a difference between consumptive and non-consumptive uses. However, I am less certain that we have adequately explored whether moving between different consumptive uses could result in very different environmental outcomes. So will groundwater quality improve or decline? I don't think we know. Could nitrate impacts change? Could cumulative effects emerge over time? Given Canterbury's ongoing groundwater challenges, those questions are important, and getting this right matters. For me, these questions remain. Have we fully understood and adequately assessed environmental effects that could arise from this proposal? And as governors, we need to listen to all of our communities and make a decision seeking the best outcomes for them and the environment. And we also must consider those who wait in line still and will not be seeing any benefits from this plan change. Are we truly comfortable in allowing the market to make this decision for us? And for those reasons, at the moment, I cannot support this going forward.
Any further? Anyone else?
No.
I've had a couple for, I've had a couple against, but I've got a few. So Councillor Davis, you put your hand up first there, and then
Thank you.
Councillor Gerard.
Yeah, I understand the intent. I think all three issues should be treated separately. I have serious concerns over what Peter mentioned when we first started, that if you're an arable farmer and you're looking across the fence, you want some cows. And a cow is a cow is a cow. Whether you're milking it or slaughtering it, it's pee, it's urine, and it's some methane. So I'm worried. I am worried. And I don't think we can be the ones who fix all these problems, but I do see what's coming, and that is in the pipeline. We've got a new RMA. June 12th, our health experts and health experts in Europe, our trading partners, are looking at the MAVs for nitrogen nitrate. And also we've got a new regional spatial plan. So I'm thinking, we've waited this long. What's the rush? They asked us to hold, and we did. But what is the rush? And if we're going to do it, it should be in full notification. So I'm not going to support it today, but that's me.
Councillor Mackay.
So I support notification for this plan change. I did have some initial earlier concerns in the process, particularly because Ngāi Tuahuriri and others had raised substantive matters around groundwater interception, substitution of water use, water bottling, and constructed wetlands. What has given me comfort is that the process has continued and the plan change has narrowed, and amendments have been made in response to that feedback. And that's why I see notification as an appropriate next step. It does not predetermine the final provisions. It allows mana whenua, wider community, consent holders and others, and all interested parties to test the provisions through the submissions and hearing process. I support using the freshwater planning process. Why? Because this clearly relates to freshwater, and the process provides the most streamlined pathway for that. Also, importantly for me, that mechanism requires tangata whenua nominated expertise on the hearing panel, which I trust and believe in. Part of my motivation for being here as a councillor is to improve environmental outcomes for future generations, and I have a particular soft spot for Te Waihora, so keep a keen eye on the planning framework and the impacts for that particular waterway. From my perspective, it's time to move forward and work through the planning framework with expert freshwater commissioners. I have more confidence in them doing that than us doing nothing. And on that basis, I support the recommendations.
Thank you. We've got 4 for, 3 against here. I'm going to go to Sarah Gerard as the last person, and then we're going to close off with Councillor Sunkel as the mover, and then we'll go to the vote.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Reading submissions, I doubted the plan change is really meeting regional plan objectives. But from the to and fro of thinking, at a high level, now I support the intent of the plan change provisions. However, I do believe that the devil will be in the detail, and this is where submissions from busy runanga organisations and relevant experts are all important. The take and use inception of infrastructure rules as permitted would need to not only address contamination but the physical effects on groundwater flows. With water resource management, water quality and quantity cannot be separated. It is the plan change, the Part C of Plan Change 8, addressing agricultural intensification and groundwater flows, are not. It's not coupling with take and use provisions is unfortunate. However, I am in high level support with the take and use provisions and change in use. And I do consider it as a prohibitive activity. It is unworkable, and as non-complying with the full set of assessment of environmental effects to that I am in agreement with it, especially to ensure the protection and enhancement of braided rivers, natural character and ecosystems, and protect the surface and groundwater ecosystem and life supporting capacity when it comes to water allocation. I can see a challenge for PC8 with the changes in the permitted use water takes from the storage lakes. For example, seasonal irrigation use changed to year-round AI data centre take for cooling water and electricity production use. and that would cause change in pattern and reliability of water use and competition between sectors, environmental flows, and minimal lake levels. I do consider change of use provisions could have the potential to incrementally build resilience as a mechanism to respond to changing hydrological budgets and changing patterns of usage within catchments. Resilience through enabling land use that is more suited to the Canterbury Plains natural dryland conditions, for example, from milk to olive oil production. Resilience through land activity changes, responding to significant adversity, for example, commodity market crashes, and diversity in land use, creating greater economic resilience. With wetland provisions, I've talked about the possible confusion, future consenting and compliance costs with the definition of constructed wetlands. And I would like to see in there the acknowledgement and definition of different types of man-made wetlands, such as habitat, catchment management, aquaculture, and constructed wetlands all have different purposes and outcomes. So with the tools in the toolbox, we need to protect our groundwater ecosystems that influence so much of Canterbury's water supplies, waterways, and lakes. The role this groundwater community of bacteria, protozoa, and crustaceans provide for our water, for our community, and economic use is significant. With a plea for submissions from the different sectors, communities, and experts, I've decided to support the PC8, and for efficiency of time and funds, I select the I'm not sure about funds, we'll say the efficiency of time, I select the freshwater planning process.
Thank you, Councillor Deputy Chair.
Kia ora tātou. I cannot support notifying Plan Change 8 at this time. While I acknowledge the intent to address current plan issues, we are operating in a period of significant resource management reform, with new legislation expected to fundamentally reshape the planning framework over the next few years. Proceeding now exposes ratepayers to hearing costs of over $1 million, with potential additional appeal costs for a plan change that may have limited lifespan before being superseded. Given current economic pressures on households and uncertainty around the future planning systems, I believe a more prudent and fiscal responsible approach is warranted. Kia ora.
Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a wide-ranging debate and a considerable number of issues canvassed in the conversation, and I might just reply briefly to some of those. Very clearly in my mind, there are checks and balances that sit within the land and water plan that do not allow for an increase in nutrient loss. So regardless of the change in water, the use that it might be put to, there are limits as to what the losses can be. We get fixated on what sort of agriculture or horticulture might be in place, but we have absolute limits that do limit the further loss on that piece of land or that land that's available. There are a lot of coulds and what ifs. We don't know, but we come back to our plan and our instruments that create the safeguards, those guide rails that allow us to achieve outcomes. There was a question about the rush. Why the rush? This decision made by the courts was 3 years ago. We will be 3 or 4 years in process if we get through to a decision. So in fact, we are not rushing anything today. We are at year 2 or 3 of a process that has challenged us. So there is no rush. We have actually taken significant time to get to this point. And I think to the simplification for local government, how do we as a region look at what the future looks like if we handicap and stop things today, because that is our belief. We need to simplify, we need to put good rules in place, and we need the opportunity to take up opportunities and options that are out there. And I recognise the what-ifs and some of the coulds, that there could be intensification. I, in my mind, do not see intensification as an outcome of this, but I do see the opportunity for land use change and shifts over time. And we talk constantly about the need to shift. land uses and the outcomes that land use change can make. Water is critical to land use within Canterbury. Yes, we could grow olives, but I think the latest olive entity in the North Island that was significant through the country has just gone into bankruptcy. Our arable farmers are looking at bankruptcy. The industry is really challenged. So if we can get Plan Change 8 through, we provide an opportunity for our wider communities to change, to shift and to adapt. And to the last point about perhaps people will rush out and use lots of water if they see this in the process. We have what is being described as the worst El Nino drought being visited upon us in this next year. So I suspect there will be lots and lots of water used just to try and maintain whatever we are doing. So thank you for the opportunity. Again, commend staff for their work and time and for the debate today.
Thank you, Councillor Sunkel. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, please raise your hands if you're against.
Against. Can we have division, please?
A division has been called.
Councillor Campbell.
An uneasy yes.
Councillor Robinson.
Against.
Chair Swiggs.
For.
Councillor Seemakai.
For.
Councillor Davis.
Against.
Councillor Moody.
Against.
Councillor Scott.
For, sorry.
Deputy Chair Cranwell.
Against.
Councillor Sunkel.
For.
Councillor Davies.
Against.
Councillor Gerard.
For.
Councillor Lamont.
For.
Councillor Mackenzie.
For.
Councillor Faulkner.
For.
Councillor M. Mackay.
For.
Councillor Ward.
For.
It's carried 11 for, 5 against. I said carried. Okay, carried. We're going to break for lunch. Back here at 1:30. Thank you, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. We will move right into item 8.4, Regional Council Landholdings Strategy. This is on pages 75 to 88 of our agenda. Recommendations are on page 75. Jesse Burgess, the Senior Strategy Manager, Lee Griffiths, General Manager Hazards, Marie Willits, Principal Strategy Advisor, and Sarah Worthington, Principal Advisor, Braided Rivers, will introduce this report. See, I had my head down looking, and I look up, and there is a Jesse Burgess. So excellent. Oh, look! Hey, look! Just right on cue. Excellent work, team. Jesse, over to you.
Kia ora, councillors, and thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair. As you've just noted, we've got the team here to present the land holdings strategy for your adoption today. To my right, I've got Marie Willits, our Principal Strategy Advisor in Strategy and Planning, Sarah Worthington, our Principal Advisor in Braided Rivers, and Lee Griffiths, our General Manager of Hazards and Operations. So I'm just going to quickly hand over to Sarah, who's going to take you through the key points of the paper and the strategy, and we're here and available to take any questions as we go.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Through you, Chair, we will just take the paper as read, as well as the draft strategy. But we will just take a few minutes to outline some key aspects of the process to date that has brought this strategy to you for adoption today, and we'll highlight some of the key components really briefly. The draft strategy began with the previous council, as you know, and was included as an implementation priority work program in the Braided River Revival Whakahaumanu Ngā Awaparahi 100-year strategy. Its inclusion in the Braided River Revival Strategy reflects the fact that most of our 31,500 hectares of land that we administer is in river environments and plays a critical role in delivering our statutory responsibilities and core services. Most recently, we workshopped the draft strategy with you in early March, and you saw some changes that included removing some of the background information, sharpening the strategic purpose, and further developing the highest and best use framework. Since then, we've worked directly with the Strategy and Policy Committee chairs and the Community Preparedness and Response to Hazard Core Service Lead to incorporate feedback from that workshop as well as your most recent feedback. We have engaged with Papatipu Runanga throughout the process, and their feedback emphasised the point of place-based implementation in their respective takiwa, and that is reflected as a priority action in the strategy itself, with supporting detail in the strategy reflecting their feedback. I'll pass on to Marie, who's just going to go over some key content.
Tēnā koutou katoa. In terms of the content, the strategy sets out a clear, transparent framework for lawful, strategic and consistent management of these land holdings, guiding decision-making and operational work programs. The key content is really illustrated on 2 pages. The strategy on a page, which is page 9 of the strategy, 85 of the council agenda, and the highest and best use framework on page 11 of the strategy and 86 of the agenda. The strategy on a page shows the relationship between the Braided River Revival, Whakahaumanu ngā Awaparahi 100-year strategy and the Landholdings strategy. It illustrates the shared integrated outcomes, the tools that we'll use, and the objectives that illustrate what success looks like. The highest and best use decision-making framework on page 11 illustrates that the audit will collate a range of information, and any decisions will be grounded in statutory purpose and legislative requirements, and include and consider all the values required to deliver the integrated outcomes. In addition to those 2 pages, the implementation section on page 12 or 87 identifies a set of initial priority actions. They include getting the data and processes analysis ready, policy development, starting with the land acquisition and disposal policy, and confirming partnership processes with Papatipu Runanga. Just to note, this is all good asset management practice and good preparation for any changes in administration resulting from local government reform. The work will occur through existing work programs and be incorporated into future long-term plan and annual plan processes, and reporting on the implementation will occur through the Council's Regional Delivery Committee. In terms of the next steps, if the strategy is adopted today, we will continue the development of an implementation plan, including those priority actions I just outlined. And through you, Chair, we're happy to answer any points of clarification. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before I go to questions, I wanted to invite the chairs of the Strategy and Policy Committee to say something, and then also the core service lead, Ian Mackenzie, for our hazards and rivers area, because he's done a considerable amount of work on this as well. So Nettles or Megan?
The only thing I'll say is thank you very much to staff from working with us on this in a probably a different process than what you're used to doing. There we worked more interactively with councillors, so thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Can I echo that? Thank you so much. A lot of work went into this, and it's a great leap forward. I know it's been an elephantine birth, but it's so great that we're here today. So thank you so much for your efforts.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Can I make my comments? Can I move the motion and make my comments then, please? Because I think my comments would be more appropriate at that part of the debate.
In the debate.
Other than to say that, look, I'm hugely grateful to the staff for listening to our advice, and very grateful to the Metals team for helping us knock this into shape.
Okay, well, I'll take that on when we get to that. Any questions of any staff? Councillor or Deputy Chair Cromwell?
Kia ora koutou. As you've already said, Papatipu have been engaged on the development of the strategy, and And you said they focused on the preference for place-based action and decision-making within their takiwā. In regards to the highest and best use framework, were the runanga involved in developing that, and were they co-designed? And I suppose on which point the runanga kind of and their values came in?
The feedback from the runanga, we did start with a draft, with a conversation about our land. The feedback from the runanga wasn't the same across the region. Obviously, when you look at the map, we have a lot more land in specific areas, and we engaged more frequently with those runanga, and they received, so co-designed the framework. I don't think we could fairly say it was a co-designed framework, but there was a lot of conversation about the content of that and the different ways that they would want to input and what those issues would be, which is where it came to very much a place-based conversation and seeking that engagement once we started implementation.
Sorry, Marie, just on, I suppose on page 11 and number 4 has got mana whenua values and engagement. They were happy kind of being in that part of the process. Just say at number 4 and not higher at all.
Yes, I think it was recognised that we do hold the land for specific purposes, and that those are set out in legislation, and that the mana whenua values would be taken into account once those things were laid out. I think it was quite a pragmatic view. That doesn't preclude a whole lot of other things happening after that.
Just one more question. This is probably more for. I'll go into. So I mean, as you know, I love it how it's connected and come from the Braided River, includes in biodiversity strategy. In regards to kind of probably more the gravel strategy, I was just thinking about if there's on the highest and best use, if there was gravel extraction objectives that conflict with the Braided River, say Braided River habitat or biodiversity enhancement or mana whenua outcomes, how would that be kind of managed? Do that make sense? I noticed the Braided River comes from the Braided River. The biodiversity is kind of mentioned a lot, but I mean, I suppose could it be in conflict with the gravel management strategy at all?
Thank you for the question through you, Mr. Chair. In a practical way, the gravel management strategy deals with fluvial gravel within a riverbed, so the wet part of the bed. The landholding strategy covers all land, so it does cover the bed and the bit outside the bed. Can I just have some clarification? Are you talking about land-based quarrying, or are you talking about river-based extraction? We're confident they don't conflict, but I'm just trying to.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably more. River based.
The highest and best use framework is quite deliberate in that it steps through all of the things that we need to be assessing when we're making a balanced assessment of what the appropriate use of land is. And so I think when it comes to gravel extraction, consideration of the gravel management strategy is one part of that will come out as we're working through that process. If it doesn't come out it would come out probably in the catchment and regional context if it hasn't been caught before then. And it's one of the things that we would need to consider on balance. I don't think it will conflict. It'll just be part of our decision-making process. And the intention is that this framework will make sure that we're very intentional about working through those steps and considering everything that we need to.
Ka pai, kia ora.
Councillor Lamont.
Kia ora. A couple of questions for clarification, probably more for the public, but can staff briefly explain how the highest and best framework balances the environmental, cultural, community and economic outcomes rather than relying solely on financial return as the first part?
I might answer this one just as a follow-on from the previous answer. So the framework is very deliberate in that it's moving us through each of the steps needed to make sure that we're considering everything that we need to when we're considering options for the use of our land. And so it will firstly identify, are there any statutory or legislative requirements, for example, areas of high ecological significance or cultural overlays being an example. The existing values and potential values assessment, that's where the really robust what's there currently, what's the potential for a particular land holding, and that's across the spectrum of values. It's not targeted to any one. And again, the catchment and regional context is when we look at the portfolio level and we start to consider those regional strategies and our various contexts as a council and as a region.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Did you have another one?
Second part.
My apologies.
That's okay. Can staff confirm that the adoption of the strategy does not predetermine future decisions in individual land holdings and that any significant future decisions would still come back to council for consideration?
The adoption of the strategy doesn't predetermine any decision on land holdings. It provides a clear framework for the staff and the council to consider how land can be managed lawfully over time, strategically and consistently over time. And while the land is held primarily for flood protection, soil conservation and endowment purposes, there may be opportunities for multiple uses, but those things will be subject to a whole lot of other decisions.
Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you. I'm looking at page 84, where you've got the landholding context, and then I was also thinking you've got 3 different landowner parties involved there, and I'm picking up a sentiment within the council that the landholding strategy is devoted to maximising monetary value. But if I look at something as that printed picture of is it the Rangitata, that there is a potential in the future, aligned with the New Zealand Conservation Amendment Bill going through with DOC and their ability to sell land, that instead of selling or making some into an economic unit, there could be biodiversity or projects that fall out. So instead of just am I making the correct assumption? I'm not. Councillor Mackenzie says I'm deluded again.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Faulkner premised his question on the basis that this strategy was about maximising the profit from the land or the remuneration from the land. That's not the premise of the land management land holding strategy.
Okay, well, was there a question that needed to be answered from what you said, John?
Yeah, there was a question, and Councillor Mackenzie is wrong. I said there does appear to be a sentiment within council around that. The question was, is there a linkage between the Conservation Bill, Amendment Bill, and the submissions into the work that is going on here?
We have acknowledged in that submission that that both land administered by the Department of Conservation and Environment Canterbury and Land Information New Zealand is very closely intertwined, as that picture of the Rakatata illustrates, and that does provide opportunities in the future. We haven't gone as far to say that the regional council would want to own or administer that land for those purposes, but those conversations, we've had conversations with the Commissioner of Crown Lands before about the obvious intertwined land and how that could be useful in the future for flood and river resilience, particularly given climate change impacts.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Chair. Just to start with, I'm just looking at the strategy page, and we've got Braided River Revival Strategy. And so I'm just wondering, with that page, why don't we have the biodiversity strategy as well, with the vision, goal, and the integrated outcomes for the biodiversity strategy? Is there
So the reason for that is, I guess, twofold. One, if we open the gates to put every strategy that we have as a council on the page, it would get quite big. But the main reason being that the point that the majority of our land holdings are within river environments and vested for flood protection and endowment purposes, which is why we've deliberately included it as an implementation action within the 100-year strategy. And so it's sitting quite deliberately beneath that strategy specifically. But we have definitely considered the biodiversity strategy in the context as we've been developing this.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just a comment on that. I think our rivers...
We're in questions. Councillor.
Okay. Are our rivers the most important ecosystems that we manage, perhaps?
I'll refer back to the integrated outcomes of the 100-year strategy, acknowledging that, yes, a significant part of that is the braided rivers, yes.
Comments?
Are there questions? Because we're in
questions coming up. Sorry. It's a weird document. Sorry about this. I'll come back.
Okay, Councillor Mackay.
Find the document is vanished.
Councillor Mackay.
My question was going to be in response to Councillor Gerard and her pre-circulated amendment, but I'll have just another question and wait for that. Just in the process of talking with councillors about the strategy, we received quite a lot of feedback about the importance of working alongside DOC and LINZ and the TAs. And I just wanted to ask if staff can confirm whether the strategy will actually improve the ability to engage with those agencies rather than operate independently from them.
The answer to that is yes. We have numerous examples of where our staff already work with those other agencies in policy and strategy, but also probably in relation to our land in operational works. And as I mentioned before, we've had conversations with the Commissioner of Crown Lands about the intertwining areas of our land. And we have worked more closely in the past on some of those matters. And I think that's where that map in particular of the Rakatata came from. And sitting down with LINZ and DOC staff was the beginning of very many interesting conversations about our collective land management as well as our statutory roles in those areas. So we're intending to pick those conversations up again and put them in as part of the implementation plan and work with them to look for some actions to work on, and those will be reported back to you.
Councillor Davies.
Thank you. This is fantastic. From what we saw, I don't know, it was 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Wonderful. And I'm happy to see, interestingly, climate adaptation is starting to move ahead in a lot of the things we're writing. Used to be down the bottom, the last thing. Now it's elevating up. And I'm just wondering if you guys thought about where you would plug in any the word community preparedness. I know it's part of that, but I don't see the word community in there much. I do word searches on these documents. So I'm like, oh, how many times did they talk about climate? Did you, I know it's a broad thing, and that's the community down there, but is there any thought to how that plugs in?
I think my response to that is you're talking about input for community, specifically about climate adaptation.
Yeah, keeping them safe.
Sorry. That is one of the key outcomes. So the integrated outcomes from both the Braided River Revival strategy and this strategy is people and property are protected and adaptive. So I think, and you'll see that reflected in some of the objectives here that are specific about community, and it might not say community, sorry. I'm just searching through them now to look. I know there is one in here, but yeah, if the objectives do illustrate some of those outcomes that you can expect to see.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Gerard.
I intend to move an amendment to Resolution 1 shortly and to add a policy requiring appropriate spatial management plans for council-owned land. And to add a policy requiring appropriate spatial management plans for council-owned land for land holding management and responsibility. Before I do, I would like to ask you, would a place-based landholding spatial management plan help ensure that before council make decisions about landholdings, we have a clear picture of the site's purpose, constraints, values, opportunities, and intended future use?
Through you, Chair, for clarification, are you referring to a separate plan to be developed at a regional level?
No, say take Rangitata, say own land that we have, and to look at that land and say what are the values, what are the constraints and opportunities for this land, and can we say, introduce recreation opportunities, or, it's sort of like, it's sort of doing it as a, dare I say, a landscape plan. It's an integrated plan that we can use to set up programs, work programs too, and that sort of thing. It's a spatial plan, but it's integrating all those.
We'll let the staff answer the question.
So the intention of the strategy is that it does that already. So the highest and best use framework deliberately steps through all of those considerations that we would need, that you're referencing for a spatial or landscape plan. I guess the addition of requiring a specific plan is just the output of that. I think the strategy itself already produces that information. And the priority actions as well. So considering one of the priority actions being a regional audit of our land holdings, it is starting to pull those together across the region.
Have you got further questions on that?
But sort of like, we got this, the strategy, the policies that we're coming up with in the plan. And if I can see, page 12. If we look at page 12, and you've got policies. So it's sort of setting up a policy that before you dispose land or make decisions on land use, great idea, making sure that we
What's
actually have a.
Do you have a question?
So would it be helpful if we had a plan that we know community and runanga and everybody in council are in agreement of what we're going to be doing, rather than somebody coming in with a great idea and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. It's sort of coming up with a plan first that's informed by, yeah.
Okay, so I think you've got the genesis of that question, and can we have an answer to that?
I think that what you're asking is, so while the highest and best use framework provides the audit, and then it provides sort of an application of that if you want to go further to propose a land use change, and that's a decision-making process that you can step through to ensure that we've got all the information available to make a good decision. It seems you're asking that as an output at the end of that for us to take the next step and look at a whole lot of different potential land uses and make a decision amongst those and then put that into a plan.
I need to move this on, but Councillor Mackay, if you've got something.
Yes, it's that question that I said I would ask in response to Councillor Gerard's amendment. Just to be clear, Councillor Gerard's courteously sent around the amendment to the rest of the councillors, so I do have that in front of me and you don't. But what the councillor has suggested is to make an amendment to also include an additional policy on page 12, and that policy be a landholding spatial management plan. So that would require all land owned by the Canterbury Regional Council to have an appropriate spatial management plan that identifies the land's purpose, values, constraints, opportunities, current and potential future uses, and intended integrated long-term management outcomes. So it's about a mapped spatial plan. And so for me, I go, well, I don't have a fixed view either way as to whether or not we need spatial planning for all of our land ownership is necessary. But what's really important for me to understand before I know whether or not to support that amendment is whether this would strengthen the strategy in a practical way, or would staff need to actually go away and do some more work before council commits to it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the answer to that is partly what you're asking for is best practice asset management. So what the audit we propose to do of all our land holdings, excuse me, is going to collect a lot of the data which could be presented spatially or on a table or in another format in the future. So I guess what we are comfortable with is with the process of the framework and the data audit to have strong asset management of our land, because we don't know everything about our land that we should. So as part of getting to where we need to be, that's a very first step that we'll create. We're confident that that's a solid platform for future decision making. It's not then necessary to do a specific spatial plan for individual land holdings. That would be done should we choose to change the use of our land in the future on an as-needed basis. Otherwise, we're doing work that we probably may not require in some areas. So I think I'm saying strong asset management as well as needed in the future. We don't need a policy for our entire regional land holdings from a staff perspective.
Okay, Councillor Mackenzie.
Well, just some clarification. So the land that we hold isn't necessarily owned by the Regional Council, is it? So land tenure is quite a long spectrum, and it goes from short-term leases to private ownership or freehold ownership. Most of 95% of ECAN's land doesn't sit in the ownership category. It sits in I think you were describing it as we hold it on behalf of, for a variety of purposes. That's true, isn't it?
It's administered under a whole lot of different legislation, which means we're required to do certain things and we can't do other things. Yep.
and can't do other things. But so we actually don't have freehold right to a lot of that land. So we couldn't sell it, for example, most of it.
I think that the ownership of land and what you can do with it are two separate things, but the audit process is that we've laid out as a priority action. The point of doing that is to be able to understand clearly for each parcel of land what those opportunities and constraints are under the legislation. Yes.
That would be good to know. Okay, have we got any further questions? Councillor Gerard.
So before we make a decision about renewing leases or disposal or land use change, could that be a time that we do a spatial management plan and get that, and put it out to public consultation or community
Through you, Chair, this highest and best use framework provides the data and the process to enable a decision. If it was a big decision that council wanted to undertake, if it was, and you thought that it required engagement, then yes, that could absolutely happen. Some of the legislation that we administer the land under requires us to go through public engagement processes, depending on what we're planning on doing with that land under some of the Reserves Act land that we manage. So hence, if all roads lead to, we need an audit to understand exactly what legislation it's held under and what the constraints and opportunities are provided by that legislation.
Okay, can I please get the resolutions up on the screen? And I've got a mover in Councillor Mackenzie. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lamont. Sorry, DC. Councillor Mackenzie, do you want to open the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sorry, staff, you can leave the table. I apologise. Thank you very much.
I think it's very important not to overthink this land strategy. This landholding strategy is specifically there to give high-level direction to staff as to how they managing or the use of our land. It gives a strategic direction, and that is effectively the essence of it is on the opening page on the fold-out bit, where you talk about the strategic direction, the highest and best use framework, which is very clear, and it steps through all the processes that Councillor Gerard is proposing in her amendment, which in my view is unnecessary, but because we have all those values that are stepped through as to how you get there. To go to Councillor Cramwell's questions, mana whenua and values and engagement is part of that, and then how we apply the process they're part of that again. And it's a priority implementation actions, the foundation of steps required to embed consistent, transparent and informed decision making. So it's a high level strategic direction from us as governors to our staff, so that they have a clear pathway to encourage them to think about whether in fact we are managing our land appropriately, and whether there are ways we can ease the burden on our ratepayers or come up with better outcomes, whether it's environmental or river management or whatever. And so it's not a determination to use land for a specific purpose, but it is a framework to assess opportunity. And I would argue that not adopting this is a do-nothing, irresponsible approach.
Councillor Lamont.
Thank you. And thank you again to staff, but also to councillor colleagues. We work collegially on this over a while, and it's so good to see it here today. A strategy endures and gives direction. Strategy does endure. People are expandable, so it's great to have a strategy. It's very much needed. It aligns public land management to achieve collective action and landscape scale outcome. A strategy should be consistent. The highest and best use is a sensible and practical approach that should provide confidence, and I support this motion. Thank you.
Okay, now I need to come to Councillor Gerard, who has indicated that there is an amendment. Can we load Councillor Gerard's amendment up on the screen, please?
Thank you.
So, Councillor Gerard, you have moved an amendment to change one of the resolutions, which is up on the screen here.
So a little bit of help there, just to say that it's not for all land, but it be land that is sort of undergoing change. So whether it's land use change or leases, that sort of thing. So it might need a little bit of help with the wording, but it's to require a spatial management plan, place-based spatial management plan that identifies the land use, land purpose, values, constraints, and opportunities.
So what is it that you want changed in this amendment? That you've proposed it, you've brought it forward, which is good. That's a good process. Firstly, do you have a seconder?
Yes. So thank you. Any seconders?
You can ask a question of this. Yes.
Can you explain what you're proposing? What is not included in this?
Right. So when we're looking at, say, a reserve, and we're looking at a change of land use, that or leases are coming up and need to be renewed, we can have that opportunity to carry out a landscape plan that incorporates community, runanga, and participation, and come up with a plan that is bringing together the values of the land. So, and obviously brings in all the constraints of dealing with flood resilience and
Okay. So
no, it's a spatial plan. Right. It's a landscape plan.
I need to progress.
It's not.
I need to. Sorry, I've turned you off, Councillor Gerard. I need to progress this meeting. Now we've got an amendment on the screen. You have said you wanted to change some words, but we also need to have somebody who's willing to second this as well to be able to progress this. So what are the words that you wanted to change so that we can then put this amended motion?
All land, so requires requires Canterbury Regional Council to undertake place-based spatial management plans.
So requires Canterbury Regional Council, so take that out, to
undertake.
So take out have an.
Yeah. Take out appropriate, just place-based spatial management plans.
Okay, so that's what you're looking for. Because now, if you're comfortable with those words, I now need to have somebody who wants to second this.
Nobody wants to.
If there's nobody is going to second it, it's good. Thank you for bringing it and putting the amendment.
It's a policy on page 12. So anybody wants to look at page 12, there's policies there that.
Okay. Well, Sarah, Councillor Gerard, we can't kind of jimmy these things. There's been no seconder, so this has failed for a lack of a seconder. But I appreciate that you've put it forward. Thank you for trying, and I have heard that this is covered under the policies in there. So let's work together to try and make sure that your issues are covered.
Can I see
No,
where?
Councillor Gerard, I've made a ruling on this. You've not got a seconder, and so the motion or your amendment has lost for the lack of a seconder. Now we need to move and continue with the debate. We will continue that conversation at a later date, so that we can try and allay your points that you've raised there. But okay, so I'll now move back into debate. Councillor Cramwell.
Kia ora tātou. Toi tū te whenua, whatu karo te takata, the land endures while people disappear. While councillors will disappear, the strategy will endure. We have been waiting for this strategy for 10 years, and to finally have this on the council table is a celebration. Yes! I commend staff on the work on this strategy and support that this strategy was developed specifically as a work program arising from the Braided River Revival Whakahaumanu Ngā Awaparahi 100-year strategy and how it applies its integrated outcomes to the management of council-owned land. Ngā mihi nui, kia ora.
Kia ora. Councillor Faulkner.
Yes, thank you, staff, for this. It's extraordinarily good in my mind, and I look at the considerations for assessing the highest and best use and the drafting gate process, so that gives me a lot of comfort. And when I look to my previous comments before about revenue generation, and one of the concerns that I've had as I came into council, if you look at the funding that we have available for biodiversity restoration, I think in the previous years it was 5 cents per hectare right over Canterbury. We've got 100,000 additional. It's less than 1 cent a hectare. So I think we need to really look at alternative ways of generating revenue, as long as they have got those drafting gates there, and it's not holders bolus economic concerns, and I haven't got those concerns at all.
Okay, we've had 4 people speak in favour. Is there anybody that's going to speak against? Are you going to speak against the motion or the motion?
Mr. Chair, I suggest you move the motion.
Yes, I'm. Councillor Gerard, are you speaking against the motion? Okay, I'm. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? And Councillor Gerard is going to abstain. Thank you very much. Noted. I'm going to move into item 9.4. which is my chair. Oh, sorry, not 9.4. It is 9.4. 9.4, which is my chair's report. Just because I need to head off shortly, and thanks to the deputy chair who'll take over. This is on pages 116 to 126 of the agenda, which is recommendation is on page 116. So another really full-on month. A lot going on, as you can gather with the amount of catching up with things that have been going on. One of the big focuses that I have had in the last month is, 1, getting some clarity around the simplification for local government, 2, making sure that ministers, MPs, wannabe MPs understand the importance of the regional council functions in the simplification for local government, and also some clarification on RMA reform and the space and the place that the regional councils will play in that. And in doing that, I've also caught up and spoken with Minister Bishop a number of times, and that has transcended into advocacy for public transport, and you'll see that we've also had a conversation with Auckland Transport around making sure that they are still part of or interested to work through the national ticketing system, which is something that we're really all looking forward to having here. And the whole point of it is to have a whole country approach to the ticketing. So that was an important meeting there. But I'll just come back to the transport piece. We're trying to unlock what's going on with the GPS, which is starting to be drawn up within the eyes of the government at the moment, the Minister Bishop especially. especially, to make sure that Canterbury and Christchurch has specific mention within those documents so that we actually get prioritisation against Auckland and Wellington specifically when it comes to transport funding, because especially in our public transport we have really suffered from being able to get the delivery from NZTA through that process. And they are starting to understand that, and we're still working through some letters, and you'll see some letters that will come through that I will be sending to the ministers for more clarity on that point. The other one is I will come and I'll just talk to the Regional Transport Committee. There's a number of things within the minutes from that committee, so I won't be able to speak to it soon. But the big thing that we have done within that is all of the territorial authorities within Canterbury have prioritised resilience as the number one thing for transport funding. They're very focused on making sure we can keep in good condition what we've already got and working on improving what we've already got rather than going out and spending big bucks on new big projects. And so that will be a real big focus, especially in rural connectivity. That was something that came up, and public transport within Canterbury or within the greater Christchurch area was the other thing. So from that point, heaps going on, and I'll just take questions if anybody's got questions on the Chair's report. Ashley, and then
it's as much a comment as anything else. In the letter sent to Paul Hodgson after the presentation the public forum at last month's meeting, you acknowledge the offer to accompany councillors on site visit to the Rakaia to better understand the problems you've highlighted to us. I, for one, would be very keen on doing that, and it's often occurred to when people come in and give a deputation or forum that often all they get from us in return is a letter saying thank you for coming along, and I'm quite keen that we be a bit more active in response to people who've made the effort to come and present to us, and that we actually get more interaction with them rather than just sending a nice letter. So I'd be very keen to do this, and I suspect some other councillors might as well.
And that's the intention. And there's a bit of agency where councillors can pick this stuff up and go, hey, look, that's come in, let's reach out or do things like that, because it is really difficult to coordinate 16 people sometimes. So I think that's a really good thing. Councillor Megan Mackay?
I have a question on the Chair's report in relation to the Canterbury Mural Forum discussion on regional spatial planning, and in particular whether you're in a position to be able to confirm mana whenua representation on the proposed spatial planning committee, and if so, like how many and how many votes, if you have that information.
Yeah, so thanks for giving me a heads up on that. Yes, we spoke at the Mural Forum. We made a call on a couple of things. One of them was the Secretariat for the spatial plan, and that will be, at this point in time, held at the Christchurch City Council. We also made a call on the proposed makeup of the spatial plan committee. So that will be all the mayors, the chair, and Papatupu Runanga. Papatupu Runanga, there are 10 within our region, and they, in the conversation with them at the forum, wanted to have only 3 members to represent the 10. And so that is what I heard, the representation of the three people would represent the voting of those 10 Papatupu Runanga. And I think we just need to get some clarity from making sure that that is interpreted that way, and we'll get that clarity in the next meeting, I'm sure.
Great, thank you. If you could get that clarity, because obviously in my communities I'm hearing that it's 3 with a vote the equivalent to 10, so thank you.
Any further questions? Well, thank you. I'll get the resolutions up on the screen. Can I have a mover? Councillor Sunkel and Councillor Lamont. All those in favour? Any against? It's carried. So Deputy Chair will take over from here. Thank you very much, everybody. No, we don't need to. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. We'll move on to 8.5, the appointment of delegates to the Local Government New Zealand Annual General Meeting. And can we please have Stephen Hall, Governance Manager, to introduce the report. Stephen, kia ora. Hand it over to you, Stephen.
Kia ora. Thank you, councillors. Hopefully a reasonably self-explanatory and straightforward report, but just noting this is a different process from what you would normally have seen for selecting delegates to the Local Government New Zealand AGM. And normally the AGM is wrapped up with the Super Local Conference, but as a result of the fuel supply issues over the last few months, LGNZ made the call to defer the conference to October, and so the AGM is being held online only at the end of July. So we have the opportunity to nominate up to 4 councillors to attend as delegates. We must appoint one as the presiding delegate who's authorised to vote on behalf of the council. We need to nominate another delegate as the alternate presiding delegate. And if the council wishes, it can also nominate other observers to attend the AGM. At the time this paper was prepared, we did not have the remits available to have a look at. So the process is that we currently have staff looking at those remits and bringing some advice, and they will be circulated to you in a table in early July. That you'll have the opportunity to discuss that mid-July, and we'll bring a paper to the July council meeting. And there are a few remits that are of interest to the council. There are quite a number, as there often are, which are relevant more to territorial authorities around issues like dog control and vape retailing. But there are also a number that are of relevance to ourselves or to this council, including questions around financial support for the implementation costs of government reforms, the removal of the representation review requirements, bulk funding of transport activities, improving LTP audit requirements, and funding of uneconomic transport infrastructure. So those are some of the issues that staff will prepare advice, and that will be circulated to you later. But the immediate decision for now is to allocate those delegates, and we would insert the relevant names into the resolutions that are in front of you. Thank you.
Kia ora, Stephen. Any questions or clarifications from Stephen? No, thank you, Stephen. You may leave the table. I'll put the recommendations up. They are on page 89. As you'll see on there, the 4 people being proposed as Chair Swiggs, myself, and Councillors Davis and Gerard, and then appoint Chair Swiggs as the presiding delegate and myself as the alternate. Any your mover? Kia ora, Councillor Ward, seconder, Councillor Faulkner. Nominate. Oh, so that'd be those 2. If you can see on there number 4, is there anyone who wants to be observer? Otherwise, we can take that part of the motion out. Anyone really want to watch? Kapai. Lots of shaking of heads. We can take number 4 out if it's okay. Councillor Ward, Councillor Faulkner, you're happy with that? Kapai. So Councillor Ward moved, Councillor Faulkner seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, carried. Kia ora, ngā mihi. Haere tonu. 8.6, Organisational Risk Appetite, on pages 93 to 98 of the agenda. Can we please welcome Giles and Curtis to the table, please? And I'll hand over to you, Giles. Oh, to Curtis. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou.
through your chair, I'll take the paper as read. I just want to acknowledge the feedback received from councillors, both through the initial development of our risk appetite positions and statements and subsequently through the workshop which we held on in May. The changes in risk appetite have been summarised in the paper following the workshop, but also in image 1 you see a diagrammatic view of how the positions have shifted based on the feedback that we received through the workshop in particular. Just wanted to highlight a couple of points. One of the key points of conversation in the workshop was that our risk appetite is always taken within context. And I hope you heard that quite clearly. And in practical terms, one way to think about that is that the scale from averse appetite through to open or seeking appetite can be quite different in terms of its breadth based on the nature of the risk. So health and safety is a clear example where even if council were to express a far more open appetite, the context in which it can operate, both from statutory legal requirements, is relatively narrow. I'd also just like to highlight that we referenced in the workshop that we would look to expand some of the risk appetite statements to provide a little bit more clarity and practical guidance around what that looks like in practice. I want to assure council that work is continuing. We've got some more work to do to refine that, to make sure that it is appropriate, and hence we've presented the statements and positions as they are today, with the intent that once those expanded statements are in a better position, we will provide those through to you as well. And finally, I wanted to acknowledge its reference in the paper with the corridor at the workshop, particularly as related to partnership risk and where that was considered in amongst risk appetite. It's a key consideration as we are building out those expanded statements. We recognise that partnership risk presents through a number of categories, and we want to make sure we do that to the best intent that we can, but it is forefront in terms of our thinking and when we bring those expanded statements through. So happy to pause there, ask if there are any questions prior to moving forward.
Yeah, kia ora kōrua. Yeah, any questions of clarification? Any comments? Or are you going to wait till... Yeah, none? Well, kia ora kōrua. Thank you both for that. You may leave the table. I'll put the motion up, which was on page 93. Councillor Ward will move. Any seconders? Councillor Davies. Over to you, Nick. Any comments?
I haven't got a lot of comments. I just think that this is a good cover off for our organisation around our risk appetite, and that's why I'm prepared to move this motion.
Any other discussions? Kia ora, Councillor Davies.
I just want to say, bring this with you tomorrow to the thing we're running, because think about it. It's about risk and our appetite.
Kia ora, any other discussion? Yes, Councillor Gerard.
Just about our cyber security, given that the government have made this announcement, maybe we could step up.
Kia ora. Thank you for that comment. Motion's there. Please, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carried. Kia ora. Ngā mihi. Haere tonu. Now we're on to section 9.1, the resolution status report on pages 99 to 109. I could ask David Peter O'Connell, please come to the table. Over to you, David.
Kia ora koutou, councillors. I'll take the report as read, but in noting the paper, just a few updates. Just in our current resolutions, the one with regard to the Simplifying Local Government Reference Group, note that number 4 in that resolution has been completed with the appointment of Councillor Lamont as the lead for that reference group. And also just noting in the outstanding actions that 9.3 on today's agenda is the report in response to the notice of motion regarding Te Awaparahi Bay. So that that resolution will close after this meeting. And also
The earlier notice of motion relates to the outstanding resolution, which the report is already underway to come forward to the July meeting to close that resolution. So otherwise, happy to take any questions.
Kia ora, David. Any questions of clarification? None. You may leave the table, David. Tēnā koe. But don't stay away. Don't stay away too long. The motion is on page 99. We'll get it up on the screen. Can we have a mover? Councillor Faulkner, seconder. Councillor Campbell. Any discussion, Koro, on that? Councillor Faulkner, Councillor Campbell, any discussion? No. In that case, I'll put the motion forward. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, carried. Kia ora, tēnā koutou. 9.2, previous committee activities and minutes. And I would like to call David O'Connell, Perenara O'Connell, to the table, please. Introduce the paper, please, David.
Kia ora anō. I'll take the paper as read and invite the chair to invite any of the committee chairs to comment with regard to any of the minutes, but take them as tabled.
As Chair Dion Swiggs is not here, I'll move on. Over to you, John Sutton. Do we have any comments?
Very briefly, if I find my notes. Matters sort of that came through were a concept of operations, a very clear process that allows for emergency management partners in Canterbury to have good guidance as to how to manage responses and people exclusions and the like, which is a piece of work that we've needed to do. So it's an update of our systems to allow us to function. A rates capping letter has been sent to the Minister, but I see others have sent such letters and responses have come back. We began a conversation with telecoms around the challenge of comms dropping out in significant events. We were going to go to the Minister and others, but the telecom entities have joined us in a conversation, so we will see where that takes us. The tsunami blue zone, which is an identification of those tsunami potential zones, which is an aggregation of some of the old zones across differing TAs, has been put together and put in place. There is no significant change to those areas that may be deemed to be of risk, but it clarifies the position and it sits out there. And a C10 policy, which is the cadre of 10, I guess, ready reaction team that shifts around the country in emergency events. The policy that was in place has been reorganised, and in doing so, we note the issue that we're starting to have burnout in staff and burnout in the willingness of territorial authorities to let staff go due to the number of events that are happening around the country, which creates a challenge for everyone as these events ramp up.
Kia ora, Councillor Sunknall. I forgot to mention that you are the Deputy Chair of the CDM Joint Committee. So tēnā koe, thank you for that. I'll call on the Chair of the Regulation Hearing Committee, Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, through your Chair. I'll take the papers that are read. These are the papers in your supplementary, separately circulated attachments. So on page 362, that meeting was the 13th of May meeting, and at that meeting there was quite a in-depth discussion around the dashboard report, which was a report that we get roughly every 3 months on consents and compliance. And just to add there that we had a workshop pre-Christmas and staff took on board some of the governance questions that we would like answered, or the whether you call them KPIs, or we wanted the assurance around particular attributes that were being met in both consents and compliance, and that's a piece of work. And subsequently, we've actually had a meeting looking at
Kia ora, Councillor Mackay, thank you for that. I'll call on the Deputy Chair of Audit and Risk Committee from their meeting on the 10th of June on page 371, Councillor Ward.
Thanks, Jane. Audit and Risk meeting was held on the 10th of June. We received an interim audit report from Audit New Zealand for 2025-26, and note that the final Audit New Zealand final report will be presented probably at the next Audit and Risk Committee in the near future. We also note that the proposed audit fee from Audit New Zealand will be going up by 7%, by another $16,144 to $253,353. Seems to be a sort of quite a rounded sort of amount, doesn't it? Which I mean, thanks to staff, because they actually did manage to negotiate it down from the 10% increase. And this was brought around because there was some overruns from the last financial year. The Bancorp Treasury report is always very interesting given the current geopolitical unrest globally at present. I did wonder when he said he thought that our economy locally was recovering. Sort of find that hard to believe given the high costs of fertiliser, food and fuel. And note this probably going forward will cause some food inflation. And we also see an increase in interest rates for the 3 years swap rate. I mean, Dion alluded to this before, that our total borrowings are well within the parameters of our organisation at 1%. So I think we need to have a pat on the back for that. We talked about strategic transition program that is in place, and it's establishment of a steering committee, work streams, coordination and recruitment of transition staff. And then the last thing that we talked about at length was around our risk management update, and that's local government reform, governance, financial sustainability, disruptive events, workforce, stakeholder relationships, and the geopolitical space that we're currently in. Any questions?
Kia ora, councillors. Thank you for reporting back. So is there any questions of clarification either to our three councillors here or to David? Councillor Gerard.
Any anything about cyber security in there? No.
No, because we talked about that earlier in a workshop, didn't we, to all councillors? So no, we didn't discuss it at Audit and Risk because we felt that it had been covered off.
Just the, I guess the latest announcement is covering what we covered the other day.
Just a comment from Stephanie.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Gerard. Yes, I noted the 3-page statement from the Five Eyes Nations, which was released yesterday. I have brought that to the attention of our security team. They are looking at that, and we will seek clarification, as I imagine many organisations within Aotearoa New Zealand will. And as soon as I have that, I will come back to you.
No other questions for David? You may leave the table. Kia ora. We're going to take a 2-minute recess while we just get our tech sorted, and then we'll come back to the resolution. Kia ora. Kia ora koutou. Just returning now. A bit of a technical glitch. If we could have the resolution for 9.2 on the screen, please. Moved by Councillor Mackay, Claire Mackay. Seconder, Councillor Faulkner. Any kōrero debate? Mover and a seconder? None? Ka pai. All those in favour, please say aye. Kia ora, carried. Thank you for that. Tonu, moving along to 9.3, resolving council resolution Te Awaparahi Bay Expansion Project. Can I please invite Brett Aldridge and Paul Holst to the tables, please? And Jen, kia ora.
Thank you, Brett. Good afternoon, Council. Yes, the purpose of this, well, actually before I start, just to introduce Paul Holst, Manager of Regulatory Implementation, and Jennifer Rochford, Manager of Compliance Monitoring and Enforcement. The purpose of the paper today is to provide information to you to ideally gain agreement on the closure of Part 3 of a 4-part resolution that was, notice of motion that was put in September 2025. Parts 1, 2 and 4 of the resolution have been closed and presented in previous council resolution reports. From there, I think I take the paper as read and we're available to take questions.
Kia ora, questions, Councillor Campbell.
Paragraph 11 on page, whatever it is, 114. Last sentence says, internal legal advice recommended pursuing an abatement notice over a consent review. Can you expand on why that internal advice recommended that?
Yes, I think I can. So there are a number of mechanisms that we have available to us to deal with compliance issues. Consent review is one. Abatement notice is another. They are very different mechanisms. Consent review really requires the burden of proof on us to prove that the consent is no longer and that we bring it back and we review the conditions of that consent. The legal advice is that we were nowhere near that threshold. There's a very high bar to get across. And so an abatement notice was a mechanism that was possible to be used. In the event, we didn't issue an abatement notice either. The consent in question was granted immediately post and as a bit of, to facilitate earthquake recovery. It is nearing its end, and the sediment, the part of the reclamation where the sediment discharges are likely to happen, is also getting very close. We would have needed to issue an abatement notice under Section 17 of the Act, which is a difficult proposition again and requires the burden of proof to fall to us. And we took the pathway to work closely with the Littleton Port Company to work to mitigate their sediment discharges. That's perhaps the other thing I would say is, although this paper could be read to suggest that legal advice dictates our enforcement decisions, it doesn't. It advises us, and the decision is an operational one.
Supplementary?
Just one question, paragraph 20. As part of ongoing compliance monitoring, staff will maintain engagement with LBC to ensure timely communication of any issues or concerns if they arise. What do we regard as timely? Are we going to read it in the press before we find out about it?
That has not been our experience with reporting our issues proactively to ourselves so that we can actually go out and monitor. It is part of, Littleton Port Company is also part of the Healthy Harbours program. You know, we have Environment Canterbury, Ngāti Wheke, Littleton Port Company all working together, so that program ensures better communication with all those parties working for Whakatau.
Kia ora. Any other questions?
As I said, it is a well-functioning board, that governance board. Having said that, you know, nothing's perfect, but yeah.
Any other questions of clarification? None. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Jen. You may leave the table. The recommendations are on page 112. We'll put those on screen. We have a mover, Councillor C. Mackay, seconder, Councillor Davies. No discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, kia ora, carried. Kia ora. Kia ora tātou. We've come to the end of the open meeting. We'll be moving into public excluded. Can I please have a mover? To move into public. We'll have to slow down a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, slow down a bit. I will just ask anyone who should not be in the room, may you please leave? That Carl Diamond, Manager Biodiversity and Biosecurity, Paul Hulse, General Manager Regulatory Implementation, remain after the public have been excluded. And Tia Natchif, you're not on my list, sorry Tia. Item 10.2.3 of the public excluded agenda, knowledge relevant to the matters under consideration. Therefore, could we have a mover to move into public excluded? Councillor Ward, seconder. Councillor Johnson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, kia ora, carried. You want to abstain from going into public excluded? Yep, you can. You can. Back on. We're back into the open meeting. Kia ora. I'd just like to number 11, next meeting. The next council meeting will be held on the 22nd of July 2026. We have come down to the finish of the hui, and I'll ask Councillor Lamont to finish off with Karakia.
Unahia, te po, kia wātia, kia wātia. Ai, ko wātia.
Kia ora, ko wātia. Ngā mihi kia koutou, kia koe, Councillor Lamont, tēnā koe moto Karakia, tuku I tēnei ahi. Nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora.